Welcome to the fantasy audiobook. Sign in at the end of the world. Devour the Fire Lord at the beginning. Chapter 21. Concubine Lu Qing. Why does it feel like this Madonna has a high status? The people in the law enforcement team are very respectful to her, and even Weilinger knows her. Seeing the confusion in Mu Chu's eyes, Weilinger explained. Sister Qingfei is the captain of the medical team in the base. She was a doctoral student in medicine at Yuhai University before the end of the world. After the apocalypse broke out, she awakened her healing powers. Sister Qingfei is kind-hearted, and she will also use her own money to help those survivors who are in need. In the apocalypse, I have rescued countless injured awakened people and innocent survivors. I am regarded by many people in the base as an angelic and bodhisattva-like figure. Really, that's really a great virgin. The corners of Mu Chu's lips curled up, remembering concubine Lu Qing's righteous words yesterday and her overflowing sympathy, she couldn't help but laugh. It seems that the establishment of this Yuhai base is quite complete. Mu Chu said. That's right. As soon as Weilinger heard Mu Chu praise the Yuhai safe zone, she couldn't help but continue to say. There are 3 teams established in the Yuhai base, which are organized according to their functions into the search team, the law enforcement team and the final medical team. The members of the search team are us awakened ones who have certain destructive power and self-protection and investigation capabilities. Their main job is to search the ruins and rescue survivors in the city. The main task of the law enforcement team is to supervise the order in the safe zone, which includes the recruited ordinary guards and the special law enforcement team specifically targeting the awakened. Mu Chu thought of the A-level awakened person Li Amber that she met that day. He must be a member of the special law enforcement team that specializes in dealing with awakened people. The search team and law enforcement team are responsible for the duties inside and outside the base, and they all exist to maintain the order of the Yuhai safety zone. As for the final medical team, there are only a few dozen members in the entire medical team, but without exception, they are all rare therapeutic awakeners. Don't underestimate this medical team, which only has a few dozen people. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, there are countless new viral diseases that have spawned. Ordinary doctors are completely helpless, and with the lack of drugs, it is even more difficult to diagnose and treat. In the end, all kinds of strange diseases must be treated by the awakened people of the medical team without exception. Even if our search team is injured when going out, only awakened people with healing abilities can relieve the injuries as soon as possible and save the lives of the awakened people. Speaking of this, Weilinger looked at Mu Chu with sympathetic eyes, and then sighed. And Sister Qingfei is an important member of the Yuhai medical team. If you offend Sister Qingfei, you will be in trouble. If you are injured or infected with any virus in the future, I am afraid that no one in the entire medical team will come to treat you. Besides, there are many suitors for Sister Qingfei in the search team. You provoked Sister Qingfei so much yesterday. Be careful that someone might stumble upon you when you go out. Weilinger's words were very detailed and full of concern. Obviously her main purpose of coming here today is not only to warn Mu Chu on behalf of her superiors, but also to give Mu Chu a reminder. Mu Chu felt funny. This girl was obviously worried about herself, but she didn't dare to say it out loud, so she could only remind herself to be careful by asking for help. Then I really have to thank you for your teaching, Captain of the Guard. Mu Chu said with a smile. It seems that I am causing trouble for you this time. Weilinger pursed her lips, with an arrogant little expression, and hummed softly, it's good that you know. Please be nicer to Sister Qingfei when you see me in the future, do you hear me? Mu Chu nodded and said yes with a smile. Since Weilinger said so, he was not an ignorant person. And that Ma Kun, the people above have also warned him. If he troubles you again, just tell me and see if I don't beat him all over the ground. As she spoke, Weilinger did not forget to wave her white pink fists with a fierce look. As for you, just be more at ease with me. Tomorrow the search team will go out of the city to perform a mission. If you behave better, consider it as a reward for me. While Mu Chu and Weilinger were talking, they were in a bar in a certain neighborhood of Yuhai safe zone. There are lights and colorful decorations, a noisy environment, a surging flow of people, noisy drum beats, and enchanting dancing figures everywhere in this underground bar. What is surprising is that since the outbreak of the apocalypse, there have been very few places where such human groups can move. Even the Yuhai safety zone has only restored some of the important building facilities used for medical research. The background behind this bar being able to restore power supply facilities so quickly can be imagined. In a luxurious box in the bar, a slightly fat young man with short hair was lying on a high-end sofa, holding a wine bottle in his hand and holding two scantily clad and pretty girls in his arms. Standing directly in front was a man with a mustache and a wretched face. Ma Kun clutched his still aching shoulder and complained to the fat man in front of him. "Brother Hao, it's obvious that Mu Chu doesn't take our boss Wang seriously. I even mentioned the boss's name and he still dares to be so arrogant. A newcomer almost peed on our heads. You have to avenge me." Ma Kun was crying, looking like he was suffering, and he cried out everything that happened to the man in front of him who looked younger than him. Even so, Ma Kun did not feel humiliated because this man had extraordinary influence even in the entire Yuhai safe zone. This person is one of the 3 destruction level guardians of the Yuhai safe zone, Wang Dapeng's younger brother Wang Hao. Wang Hao himself is not very powerful, but the most fortunate thing is that he has a powerful and crazy brother. After the outbreak of the apocalypse, Wang Dapeng, who was originally a gangster, turned out to be a gangster. With his powerful superpowers and ruthless personality, he quickly became a gangster. A post-apocalyptic hero who dominates one side. With the support of such a prosperous giant brother, Wang Hao also had a group of younger brothers, and he was still prospering in this cruel apocalypse. Listening to Ma Kun's cry, Wang Hao didn't care. He drank the last bottle of liquor in his hand and threw it aside. Then he began to move his hands up and down the 2 beauties in his arms, and the girl in his arms also let out a coquettish giggle. After playing around for a while, Wang Hao lay down on the sofa again, picked up a cigarette and started smoking, and said casually, "Xiao Hanyan has sent someone to warn you, saying that if you dare to be dishonest again, you will be told to get out of the base." Mu Chu's appearance appeared in Ma Kun's mind, and he said harshly, "Then let's just let this matter go." "Of course not." Wang Hao slapped the table, dusted off the cigarette ashes on his hands, and said sternly, "Anyone who dares to touch our people is provoking my brother's face. If this allows him to live in peace, then where is the majesty of our Shenglong society?" Shenglongwei is the organization founded by Wang Dapeng before it was merged into Yuhai base. This organization is so powerful that before the Yuhai base was established, just mentioning the name could scare many awakened people in the Yuhai realm into fear and submission. Ma Kun had already anticipated Wang Hao's answer, and his crying just now was just for fun. During the Shenglong Wei, Wang Dapeng's reputation was unparalleled. Who dared to provoke his men? Now let alone provocation, although he is just an ordinary gangster among peripheral members, he is still closely related to the Shenglong society. Mu Chu killed her directly in front of everyone. Wasn't this a slap in the face of Shenglongwei in public? Ma Kun rubbed his shoulder, which was still aching slightly, but there was a sinister smile in his heart. Mu Chu is not far from death if she dares to stroke Wang Dapeng's tiger beard. In fact, yesterday he was indeed penetrated by Mu Chu's ice pick through his shoulder blade, but what was the superpower he awakened? The biggest feature of Lizard's ability is that he can regenerate his broken limbs. Although this is far from possible at his current level, most of yesterday's injuries have healed in less than a day. Now he only thinks about how to take revenge on Mu Chu. This Mu Chu is an awakener of the elemental system. Ma Kun reminded him deliberately. Wang Hao spat, with a look of disdain on his face. "What about the awakened ones of the elemental system? If you dare to provoke me, Shenglongwei, I will still destroy his body." Then he snorted coldly and said, "This time the search team goes out to explore the ruins, Wei Ling'er's team will also go out. I will arrange manpower for you then. If you find a chance, you can do the job for the one named Mu Chu. Remember to keep your hands and feet clean." Ma Kun beamed with joy. This was what he had been waiting for. You know, when the search team goes out on an exploration mission, it is normal for a few people to die. By the way, if you have a chance, remember to fix that little girl Wei Ling'er for me. Wang Hao suddenly revealed a lustful look in his eyes, licked his lips and said, "I've been eyeing that little girl for a long time, Jen, that little figure looks really alluring." As he spoke, his arms hugged the 2 beauties in his arms tighter, making the beauties around him squeal. Ma Kun was sarcastic in his heart, but he couldn't show it on his face, so he quickly nodded in agreement. A cold light flashed across Ma Kun's eyes as he walked out of the bar and walked in the alley. Mu Chu, I will definitely kill you without a burial place this time. As night fell, Mu Chu was sitting on the Simmons mattress under the chandelier of the second-story villa, holding an ice blue crystal core in each hand. The bright chandelier reflected Mu Chu's handsome face. After the Yuhai base was established, the top management quickly restored the power supply system to some important areas, and the high-end villa area where Mu Chu was located was also within this line. Mu Chu's eyes were closed, and there was a deep blue crystal core in each palm. The crystal core is exuding a magnificent light blue halo, and ripples bloom under the reflection of the light. The halo lingered around Mu Chu's hand at first, but then it seemed to be attracted by something, and gradually merged into Mu Chu's body. As these halos merged into Mu Chu's body, the temperature of Mu Chu's body surface also gradually dropped, causing the temperature of the air to drop a lot. The entire villa seemed to have been invaded by cold air. There was already a strange air conditioning blowing before the air conditioner was turned on. The water vapor in the room began to condense into transparent water droplets, dripping down the walls. At a certain moment, Mu Chu suddenly opened her eyes, and saw an icy blue light flashing through her deep pupils. Sure enough, the energy in the crystal core is still far less satisfying than swallowing it directly. Mu Chu looked at the dull pile of crystal nuclei beside the bed that had been absorbed completely, and sighed softly. Only after absorbing all the energy in these crystal nuclei can he upgrade his ice powers to the peak of B level. After all, the ice zombies he absorbed were only at the early B level. If there is another attack like yesterday, the ice pick will penetrate not only Ma Kun's shoulder blades, but even half of his body will be frozen the moment it comes into contact with the ice pick, and will be shattered by the impact of the ice pick in an instant. Mu Chu has not yet broken through the bottleneck by absorbing so many crystal nuclei. You can imagine how difficult it is for ordinary awakened people to advance. Mu Chu felt a little helpless in her heart. Logically speaking, the fire demon had devoured 8,000 human awakeners and heretics over the years, not to mention 10,000, making it the most terrifying heresy in this apocalyptic world. But the only things that were really useful to him were the fire ability and the ice ability of the zombie heretic that Balrog absorbed when he was reborn. I have to say that Balrog's luck is really bad. He only swallowed 2 elemental superpowers. It's time to explore the ruins of the city with the team tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. Mu Chu stood up and stretched, looking at the full moon through the large floor-to-ceiling windows on the second floor. A joint hunt between a zombie king and humans. Early the next morning, Mu Chu arrived at an abandoned coffee shop in the west of the city as agreed with Wei Ling. The entire coffee shop was so empty that Mu Chu could even keenly notice that the flower bed at the door was covered with dust. Mu Chu calculated the time, it should be just in time, and then pushed the door open and entered. When I walked into the coffee shop, I saw that there was no one around, except for a few people sitting at a square table in front of the lonely counter of the coffee shop. Mu Chu observed the appearance of several people and found that this team was really full of talents. Sitting on the far right side of the table is a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance and wearing work clothes. He is the kind of man who would not even glance at him when walking on the street. Sitting next to the middle-aged man was a young fat man who seemed to be in his 20s. He was eating melon seeds and chatting with the people around him, with a smile on his face. Sitting on the other side was a little girl who looked like a junior high school student. She looked about 13 or 14 years old. She had a pretty appearance. She was wearing a floral dress and her hair was tied back in a pair of ponytails. She looked cute and well-behaved. Like the girl next door. There is a little squirrel lying on the girl's shoulder, sleeping soundly on the girl's shoulder as if it is not afraid of strangers. But when Mu Chu looked at the person sitting next to the girl, she was slightly stunned, with surprise in her eyes. Why is this person here? Because several people were chatting and had their backs to Mu Chu, they obviously did not notice Mu Chu's arrival immediately. Seeing a familiar face, Mu Chu couldn't help but feel slightly startled. Why is she here? This familiar face is none other than Lu Qingfei, a member of the medical team who was mocked by Mu Chu as the Madonna yesterday. Hey, Mu Chu, you're here. Just when Mu Chu was confused, a sweet voice like a silver bell suddenly came from the front. Mu Chu turned around and saw Wei Linger holding a spoon at the counter in front of her, preparing a cup of coffee on the counter. Hearing Wei Linger's voice, the people who were talking stopped talking and looked at Mu Chu, who had just entered. The middle-aged man and the fat man looked at Mu Chu with curious eyes. Apparently they also knew something about Mu Chu, who had caused quite a stir in the base in recent days. The little girl glanced at Mu Chu and then hurriedly lowered her head. As for concubine Lu Qing, she glanced at Mu Chu, frowned, and then stopped talking. "Ha ha, you've made us wait for so long for a newcomer, you're really proud of yourself." A slightly sarcastic voice came, and Mu Chu turned around to see a short-haired man wearing a vest leaning against the corner, holding a coffee cup in his hand and looking at Mu Chu with a somewhat unhappy expression. Mu Chu frowned slightly. For some reason, he sensed an undisguised malice from this man. "If I remember correctly, it's not the agreed gathering time yet, right?" Mu Chu retorted, and a flash of anger suddenly flashed in the short-haired man's eyes, and he stared at Mu Chu with a pair of tiger eyes. Mu Chu naturally showed no fear and looked at him calmly. This must be little brother Mu Chu, who is famous in Yuhai these days. Just as the atmosphere solidified, the middle-aged man sitting at the table stood up, walked over to Mu Chu and said with a simple and honest smile, "A rare elemental power, even at my age I am envious of it." Mu Chu turned her gaze over, smiled calmly and said, "No, I'm just lucky." At this time, Wei Linger also came over with a cup of coffee. First he glared at the short-haired man leaning against the corner, then handed the coffee in his hand to Mu Chu and whispered in his ear. "This man's name is Song Konghua. He is an awakener of the mutation system. Sister Qingfei saved his life before. He is also one of Sister Qingfei's suitors." Mu Chu suddenly realized that no wonder this short-haired man was targeting her so much. It turned out that he was standing up for Lu Qingfei, the Holy Mother. Then Wei Linger also began to introduce the team members to Mu Chu. "This middle-aged uncle is called Chen Weio. His ability is like a barrier and he is a reliable defensive player in our team." Where? Chen Weio touched the back of his head honestly, wiped his hands with his pants and said, "Don't listen to Linger's nonsense. I was a migrant worker before the end of the world. I joined the search team just to make a living in this shitty end of the world." Mu Chu shook hands with him, smiled and nodded. Chen Weio secretly breathed a sigh of relief. It seemed that this newcomer was not as difficult to get along with as rumored. Wei Linger pointed at the fat young man sitting on the sofa and said, "His name is Zhu Feng, you can just call him Fatty. His ability is..." The fat man suddenly grinned and stood up from the sofa. Then his body moved and blurred into an afterimage. After a few steps, he came to Mu Chu and answered, "My superpower is super high-speed movement. How about it, brother? It's not bad, right? It's pretty good." Mu Chu did not expect that this man was still a flexible fat man, and his slightly fat body did not slow down his wind-like speed at all. After a brief induction, this fat man is also a B-level awakener. With his speed and ability, he should be responsible for investigation work in the team. Of course, this speed is still far behind his rabbit charm. Mu Chu looked at the girl with two ponytails, her head lowered, huddled in concubine Lu Qing's arms. The girl seemed to be aware of Mu Chu's gaze. She raised her head and lowered her head hurriedly. Wei Linger stepped forward and rubbed the girl's head, smiling sweetly. "This is Sister Xu Wen. She is relatively introverted to strangers. You can just get to know her better in the future." Hello. Hearing Wei Linger introducing herself, Xu Wen blushed and said hello to Mu Chu. Mu Chu naturally had no ill intentions towards such a cute little sister and responded with a smile. Wei Linger said to Mu Chu, "Don't underestimate Sister Xu Wen, her ability is said to be able to listen to the voices of all things." After hearing this, Xu Wen hurriedly waved her little hands, and was so anxious that she shook the squirrel off her shoulders. No, now we can only communicate with some sane animals." Wei Linger pinched Xu Wen's fair and slightly voluptuous face, and said with a smile, "Even so, Xiao Wenwen is still an important source of information for our team. Relying on Sister Wenwen's information, we avoided a lot of trouble during the execution of the mission." Mu Chu nodded. If this little sister really has the ability to communicate with all things, then she is indeed a powerful superpower with great potential for growth. Next, Wei Linger looked at concubine Lu Qing, who was also sitting beside her. She didn't know how to introduce him for a moment. After all, the two of them had a holiday not long ago. Before Wei Linger could speak, concubine Lu Qing stood up first. Although she was a little embarrassed, she still smiled at Mu Chu and said, "Linger has already told me what happened that day. It's true that I misunderstood you. I apologize to you for my rashness that day, but I still cannot agree with your actions. After all, it is a human life no matter what, and his life and death should not be decided so easily." Mu Chu looked around concubine Lu Qing. Today she was still wearing dark blue denim trousers, but the white coat was missing from her upper body, which vividly outlined her perfect and proud figure. Her beautiful face, with just a touch of pink and white, is already a rare beauty in the apocalypse. Her long hair is tied into a single ponytail at the back of her head, adding a sense of vitality on the basis of maturity and elegance. After hearing concubine Lu Qing's words, Mu Chu first turned her head and glanced at Wei Linger. Seeing the latter showing a threatening look on his face, Mu Chujuni also smiled. "I accept your apology, but of course, I will still not give up my principles. Anyone who dares to provoke me will definitely die without a burial place." After saying the last sentence, Mu Chu still had a spring breeze-like smile on her face, as if what she said was just a trivial matter. "Humph, what a loud tone." Song Kongwa walked over from the side, looked at Mu Chu with a somewhat unkind expression, and said in a cold tone, "I hope some people won't be so frightened that they can't walk when they see those zombie heretics in the ruins of the city." Mu Chu was not angry about this, but just smiled. "Then let's wait and see. Would you feel angry if there were ants crawling under your feet? If you don't like it, just find an opportunity to step on it." Mu Chu's dull reaction actually made Song Kongwa feel as if his fist had hit cotton. Mu Chu's calm smile looked more like a mocking sneer in Song Kongwa's eyes. He ground his teeth in anger, snorted and walked aside. However, Mu Chu felt keenly that Song Konghua's supernatural power had reached the peak of B level, and the intensity of the supernatural energy was also the highest in the entire team. This kind of strength is among the best in the search team, no wonder he has such an arrogant attitude. Okay, today is the first time we meet. If we don't have to perform a mission, we must go out for a drink." Fat man, Zhu Feng saw this and quickly came out to smooth things over, put his arms around Mu Chu's neck, and said with a natural smile, "Welcome brother Mu to join our Demon Glantian team." Mu Chu, butterfly dream fading. Mu Chu turned her head stiffly and looked at Wei Linger with an unnatural expression on her face. The corner of her mouth twitched and said, "This name couldn't have been given by you, right?" "Aha." Wei Linger snorted softly and raised her neck like a proud swan. "How is it? My name is quite nice, isn't it?" Mu Chu twitched the corner of her mouth again, dumbfounded. "Yes, quite individual. Boss, I said at the beginning that it would be great to call the team the Avengers. We are domineering but also a little tender. At first glance, we are a team with substance." Fatty seemed to have some objections to the name of the team. "Haha, I think the God of War team is pretty good too. This is the aesthetics of the middle-aged Uncle Chen Weo. Do you have any objections to my name?" Wei Linger waved her pink fist and showed her fangs, looking like she was going to explode. Don't dare. Mu Chu took a sip of coffee silently. The smell is too strong. He is really not suitable for drinking such high-end products." The group of people didn't chat for too long before packing up their equipment and getting ready to set off. Mu Chu noticed that except for Lao Chen who carried a standard rifle on his shoulder and Song Kongwa who had a pistol on his waist, the others did not bring any obvious equipment. Only Lu Qingfei carried a small medical kit. Mu Chu followed everyone to the back door of the cafe. I saw two domineering-looking Jeep off-road vehicles parked one behind the other at the entrance of the alley behind the coffee shop. The off-road vehicle obviously showed signs of being modified. The tires were wide and thick, and the front and rear bumpers of the vehicle were welded with strong steel bars. They were as ferocious as the fangs of a beast. From a distance, it looked like two steel beasts crawling on the ground. Seeing that there were only two cars around, Mu Chu couldn't help but wonder, are we setting off alone? Song Kongwa mocked. You are really a newcomer, you don't even know such an important rule. Chen Weo, the uncle in work clothes, explained, haha, little brother Mu is new here. It's normal not to know the rules of the search team soon after entering the base. Under normal circumstances, each search team has its own independent gathering place, and the outbound missions never start together. Chen Weo suddenly said solemnly to Mu Chu. Moreover, even if the search team comes out of the same base, they may not be trustworthy when they arrive in the ruins outside the city. Chen Weo squinted his eyes and looked at the skyline stretching outside the city, with a slight sense of vicissitudes of life on his face. In the vast ruins of the city, the people there are truly lawless and can do anything. The only thing you can trust is your teammates and your own abilities. We have seen too many examples of interceptions and search teams fighting and killing each other because of a little grudge. It can be said that once the search team goes out, no one can guarantee who will actually come back alive. Speaking of this, Mu Chu noticed that everyone's face showed a solemn expression. Even the little girl named Shu Wen turned pale, as if she thought of something terrible, and her body started to tremble. Okay, old Chen, stop scaring people here. Fatty noticed the tense atmosphere and quickly stood up to refute Chen Weo. What is the level of our team this time? They are all strong soldiers. The monsters in the yellow zone can't stop us at all. Besides, don't we still have Dr. Liu, a healing awakener, and Mu Chu, an elemental awakener with amazing destructive power? This lineup can form a group to eliminate even A-level heretics. Isn't it as easy as playing a dungeon? Fat Zhu Feng was very open-minded and didn't think there would be any surprises in this mission. In short, we still have to be vigilant. The heretical abilities in the outside world are also all kinds of strange and varied. Maybe we will catch them at some point. Weilinger gave a pertinent evaluation at this time. Mu Chu nodded. It could be seen that this team had some experience in performing missions. The team was divided into two groups. Mu Chu, Fatty, Weilinger and little Lolita Shu Wen sat in the front car, with Fatty acting as the driver. The other car was occupied by the remaining Lu Qingfei, the short-haired man Song Kongwa and the middle-aged uncle Chen Weo. In the car, Mu Chu noticed that the large trunk was full of food and water, and the remaining space was filled with weapons and equipment and a small number of tools. The two, steel beasts, started with the roar of exhaust gas. Mu Chu was sitting in the passenger seat, with Weilinger and Shu Wen sitting behind her. The little girl seemed to feel a little tired. Not long after the car started, she tilted her head and fell asleep. The squirrel in her arms was not afraid of danger, and started to chew a nut. Mu Chu turned her head to look at Weilinger, and asked with an interested smile. I have never heard that concubine Lu Qing will accompany us on missions. Weilinger blinked her eyes and looked out the window pretending to be reserved. Is there any? Haha, maybe I forgot to mention it. Mu Chu is still smiling and staring. Weilinger was stared at for a while and felt uncomfortable. She shook her head and said, okay, you win. I did know that Sister Qingfei would act with us. Why is she with us? Mu Chu asked. Weilinger explained. Sister Qingfei handed over her fiancé's mobile phone to the people in the technical department, and from it they were able to decipher the location where her husband last appeared. That's why Sister Qingfei applied to her superiors to find her fiancé through the search team, but she was worried and insisted on coming, so I suggested that she join our team. In addition to searching for resources, our mission this time is also to help Sister Qingfei find her fiancé. Oh, Mu Chu didn't think it was that surprising. He had long known that the Virgin was a character who valued love and justice. Now that there was news about her husband, Mu Chu would feel abnormal if he just sat there and waited for death. Then where was the last place her husband disappeared? Weilinger shrugged and said helplessly, that place seems to be called Tiandi Entertainment Club, and it is located right at the border of the yellow zone and the red zone. That is to say, our mission may have to run through the entire yellow zone this time. Even for those of us, it is a bit dangerous to carry out such a mission. Daishandi Entertainment Club. Mu Chu's eyes widened instantly, and her expression was no longer as calm as before. He has never forgotten that the next check-in location given by the system is the Daishandi Entertainment Club. At first, he searched for nearby maps but could not find this place. Unexpectedly, he could find it now without any effort. When Weilinger saw Mu Chu's appearance, she seemed to think of something and suddenly said, I remember, you asked me about this place before. How come you know this place? Only then did Weilinger remember that she had heard this, Daishandi Entertainment Club, mentioned somewhere in Lu Qingfei's mouth, but she couldn't remember it after thinking about it for a long time. But Mu Chu's behavior reminded her that the first time she heard about this place was from Mu Chu's mouth. Wei Ling'er looked at Mu Chu with suspicious eyes. This time, it was Mu Chu's turn to feel guilty and she hurriedly explained. I have a relative who happens to work there, and I want to see if he is still alive. Wei Ling'er frowned and said, that entertainment club is located in Linan City, next to Yuhai City. Do you have relatives working there? Wei Ling'er was such a smart girl, and obviously didn't completely believe Mu Chu's words, but she could also see that Mu Chu didn't want to say anything more, so she didn't say anything more. But the fat man driving the car interrupted at this moment. What kind of relative? If you ask me, it must be Mu Chu, your goddess before the end of the world, right? You were worried about the safety of the goddess, so the first thing you thought about after being rescued to the safe area was to save the goddess from fire and water. The fat man's brain circuit is very strange, and at this time, he has already imagined a drama about a loser obsessed with a goddess. Wei Ling'er, who was sitting in the back row, gave the fat man a slap in the face, then apologized to Mu Chu. You won't blame me for Sister Qingfei's matter, right? Mu Chu shook her head and said with a smile, so when you came to my place yesterday to call for punishment, you actually wanted to get a vaccination today. Mu Chu did not forget that Wei Ling'er warned her yesterday to have a better attitude after seeing concubine Lu Qing. Obviously she had expected this situation. Wei Ling'er stuck out her tongue. Aren't I worried that you will be embarrassed when we meet? Mu Chu explained that she didn't care, but looked out the car window with a smile on her lips. Of course not. Besides, I think that with the Holy Mother Lu Qingfei here, this journey will not be too boring. The corners of Mu Chu's mouth rose, as if she had seen something interesting. Although it didn't matter what she said that day, it didn't mean that Mu Chu could agree with Lu Qingfei's ideas. During this trip, he was looking forward to the performance of the Holy Mother. Yes, this desperate mission that seemed to be full of dangers among the team members was just a leisurely trip back home in Mu Chu's eyes. Who would feel scared after returning to their hometown? Two steel-clad and tenacious steel beasts were rampaging on the deserted quiet streets, and the surrounding stores echoed with the huge roar of engines. Soon, two modified jeeps drove a group of 7 people off-road to a row of walls made of solid rocks, like steel. Mu Chu was finally able to observe the tall wall that protected tens of thousands of survivors up close this time. The appearance and function of this wall look like the kind of wall in a certain giant. They are all designed to protect the safety of survivors in the city. However, it is obvious that the workmanship of this wall is much better than that in giant. It is several feet tall and long. The wall surface is smooth, hard and thick, and the wall has a green iron color. Mu Chu speculated that the awakened people should have dug up the underground bedrock with strange strength and moved it here. Then the awakened people who had assimilated the rock carefully polished the bedrock and poured it into this steel wall. Not surprisingly, there are also special law enforcement guards patrolling the walls. After some review, the two off-road vehicles passed through the iron gate of the wall and drove out of one of the few pure lands of mankind in this apocalyptic world. Even after driving out of the fence, there is an empty highway in front, and it is still silent. Not to mention the zombies, even the bird feathers are nowhere to be seen. On the other hand, on the asphalt road that was cracked by the scorching sun, one could see large areas of dried blood. Mu Chu speculated that the surrounding area had already been cleared by the awakened ones in the base. The glaring sunlight shines in through the car window, making it hard to open your eyes, and the summer breeze brings a little coolness to your face. If it weren't for the scarlet blood stains on the ground, just looking at this scene, I would have thought it was an ordinary group outing before the end of the world. The two jeeps, which looked like ferocious steel beasts, were racing wildly on the empty asphalt road. Occasionally I encountered a few abandoned vehicles that were weathered by the weather on the road, and I would just run them over. The two off-road vehicles were speeding along the road, and in a short time they were dozens of kilometers away from Yuhai. Wild music was playing in the car, and the accelerator under the fat man's feet also accelerated crazily to the rhythm of the music. A ferocious zombie in ragged clothes and covered in blood was walking on the road nearby. Hearing the sound of the accelerator, he rushed towards Mu Chu's off-road vehicle like a lion fighting a rabbit. The fat man was unafraid. He swayed to the music, stepped on the accelerator, and hit the zombie directly. In an instant, blood spattered on the front bumper of the off-road vehicle, and the glass was already covered in flesh and blood. Not surprised, the fat man turned on the wipers to clean the windshield, while Wailinger in the back seat let out a bored sigh, as if she had long been used to it. He is indeed a member of the search team who has experienced hundreds of battles. Miu-Chu held her chin and nodded in appreciation. Miu-Chu, you have a very strong psychological quality. The things you will see in the future are much more terrifying than these. Fatty saw Miu-Chu looking at the blur of flesh and blood outside the window and was in a daze. He thought Miu-Chu was frightened by the violent scene and warned him. Miu-Chu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and said, "Then we will have to help you, fat man, to protect us." The fat man patted his chest, gave a thumbs up confidently, and said, "Don't worry, Zhu Feng, will be here, there will be no surprises." Unlike the Yuhai safe zone, which was quickly recaptured, Linan City quickly faced collapse shortly after the outbreak of the apocalyptic virus. In less than a month, Linan City was captured by countless zombie heretics and completely turned into a survival paradise for these irrational monsters. Here many zombie heretics eat each other and evolve, breeding many heretical monsters with terrifying strength. In a neighborhood in Linan City, hundreds of kilometers away from Yuhai City, thousands of hungry zombies with haggard bodies, staring with empty eyes, waving their deformed sharp claws, and constantly making gurgle sounds from their throats. The air exuded a strong smell of putrefaction and blood, as if forming a smelly blood mist, which was nauseating. Because they cannot be replenished with fresh flesh and blood for a long time, these zombies can only rely on the small amount of supernatural energy in their bodies to barely maintain their lives. When the supernatural energy in their bodies is not enough to support action, they will kill the same kind crazily, fight and devour each other, and rob each other's supernatural energy to survive. It has nothing to do with rational wisdom, it is just a survival instinct of a living thing. A zombie seemed to have discovered something. It suddenly opened its mouth, stretched out its sharp claws, and rushed towards an iron fence in the distance with a ferocious face. At this moment, the violent roar of the car sounded. A jeep with a ferocious appearance and armored body armor sprinted like a steel beast, slamming into an iron fence next to the block. All the zombies behind the iron net were crushed and destroyed by this steel behemoth. For a moment, blood mist filled the sky, and blurred limbs and broken arms were splashed everywhere, directly dyeing the off-road vehicle body in blood red. Woohoo! The fat man got out of the car first. He was wearing a pair of square sunglasses and looking at his masterpiece with a proud look. Full of darkness and horror, the aesthetics of violence are simply a classic work of art. The fat man's face showed a look of intoxication, as if he was sighing for his masterpiece. "Stop playing tricks, don't forget that we are here to do business." Wailinger and little Lolita Shu Wen walked out of the car. Seeing this bloody scene, they both frowned with disgust on their faces. Miu-Chu also got out of the passenger seat, still wearing a black windbreaker and waist-tight trousers, looking casual. Feeling the strong smell of blood in the air, as if the real blood was about to invade the skin, arousing the hidden inner demons. Miu-Chu breathed a sigh of relief. The violent emotions belonging to the fire demon lord in his body also rarely conveyed a relaxed emotion. Feeling like going home. At the same time, the same violent engine roar came from behind, and another armed off-road vehicle sped from behind. Holy Mother! Lu Qingfei, middle-aged Uncle Chen Weo and licking dog Song Kongwa got out of the car. 7 people gathered together. Wailinger was the first to say, "There are many high-level heretics in the city. Driving in and making too much noise can easily cause zombie riots. Then we have to explore on foot." With that said, Wailinger took out a tablet with an electronic map carved on it. It marks the location of a large number of resources hidden in the city. Our task is to determine the detailed location of these resources and clean up the powerful heretics around them. If survivors are found in the ruins of this city, we must protect their safety as much as possible and report to the base for rescue. Wailinger briefly introduced the general task process, then pointed to a certain location on the map and looked at Shu Wen, the Lolita in the floral skirt beside her. Shu Wen nodded knowingly, put her finger to her mouth and whistled softly. Miu-Chu seemed to feel something. She looked up and saw a sparrow the size of a hand swoop down upon hearing the sound and landed in Shu Wen's delicate palm. Several obscure sounds suddenly came out of Shu Wen's mouth. The sparrow seemed to understand something. After chirping twice, it spread its wings and flew into the distance. Mu Chu looked on in amazement. Chen Huio couldn't help but exclaimed, "No matter how many times I see Xiao Wen's abilities, I am still amazed." After a while, the sparrow flew back. Shu Wen fed a nut to it, and the little sparrow immediately rubbed Shu Wen's cheek affectionately. "Sister Ling Mao Mao said that if you go to the southeast, there will be a dark mass of zombies, and there is also a monster inside that makes Mao Mao tremble." Mu Chu examined the sparrow named Mao Mao and found that the latter was not as simple as it seemed. Although the supernatural energy in its body was not high, it still reached D level. Judging from the way it moves like the wind, this little sparrow probably has speed powers, so it would be perfect for it to explore the way. When Wei Linger learned the news, she looked at several locations marked on the map, thought for a while and then said, "In that case, let's take a detour and go to the Third People's Hospital of Linan City to search for medical resources first. Wenwen, please tell Mao Mao to check the situation from a distance and report it immediately if anything happens." Others obviously had no objections, so the group of 7 people set out on their journey towards the east direction of the city. The fat man hit Mu Chu with his elbow and said with a smile, "How about it? Wenwen's power is very convenient, right? Thanks to these little guys, we have avoided a lot of casualties." Chen Huio also said with a simple smile. Shu Wen blushed again when she heard everyone's praise. "No. Thanks to everyone for protecting me." While everyone was talking and laughing, suddenly a dozen zombies emerged from the darkness at the entrance of the street and attacked everyone with their bloody mouths open. Mu Chu had expected it, but made no move. Among the others, Lao Chen was the first to react. He folded his arms, and when the supernatural energy surged, a wide barrier several feet long appeared in front of everyone. Song Konghua's eyes flashed with murderous intent, and he roared. His body changed, and a layer of dark blue mane began to appear on his body, extending to his face. The muscles in his arms could be clearly seen bulging, and even his chest also followed. The bulge swelled, and the veins on the back of the hand popped out, and 2 sharp thorns several feet long protruded. This Song Konghua is clearly a wolf-shaped mutant awakener. Song Konghua's hamstring burst out, and immediately his feet trembled, and he rushed over like an arrow, punching a zombie hard, and the protruding spikes on the back of his fist directly stabbed the zombie's head. Pierce. Then he pulled the zombie next to him, hit the zombie's chest with both fists like a giant hammer, and immediately pulled it out with force, and the zombie was torn into 2 halves. Song Konghua's eyes were full of murderous intent, and his fighting spirit was also rising. He rushed into the zombie group alone and fought with dozens of zombies who came after hearing the sound. I saw that Song Konghua was like a jungle beast that drank blood. He rushed into the zombies like a tiger into a pack of wolves. His arms were instantly soaked with blood, and the zombies around him were even more tragic. They all fell to the ground and were disemboweled. The belly is dripping with blood, and the bloody and violent scene is unbearable to watch. The team members behind him all watched Song Konghua fighting alone, but had no intention of stepping forward to help. Roar! Suddenly, there was a loud roar in the distance. Everyone looked up and saw 2 ferocious wild dogs roaring crazily and rushing towards the barrier set up by Chen Huio with their mouths wide open. It was said to be a wild dog, but its size was comparable to that of an average adult tiger. It was huge, its hair was a strange gray-white color, and its ferocious protruding fangs were stained with blood. Just like that, the huge body of the giant dog that looked like a ferocious beast slammed into Chen Huio's barrier, but the barrier only shook, and instead the 2 ferocious beasts were bounced away. The powerful momentum forced the giant dog to roll several times on the ground, shook its head and licked its fur, then roared loudly and showed murderous intent towards Mu Chu and the others. "Hey, AB-level mutant dog. Just let me practice my skills." The fat man was experienced and could see the level of these 2 mutated dogs at a glance. He grinned and took out 2 steel-finger tigers from his waist, and rushed forward in a flash. Mu Chu nodded. These 2 mutant dogs only had the strength of the early B level, and the supernatural energy in their bodies was not stable. Fatty's super fast movement was also the most suitable for targeting such difficult mutant monsters. Sure enough, the fat man was as tall as the wind, and his speed was so fast that it was almost impossible to detect it with the naked eye. He jumped dozens of meters in the blink of an eye. Before even the two giant dogs could react, Fatty's agile figure had already dodged in front of a vicious dog. The fat man smiled at the corner of his mouth, waved the finger tiger on his fist and waved at his head. The mutated giant dog howled and was instantly knocked away several meters. Another mutated giant dog also reacted, opened its big mouth and bit the fat man. The fat man was not afraid in the face of danger, beating the giant dog back with his fists like punching sacks. This fat man has a lot of tricks up his sleeve. Mewtwo saw that Fatty didn't just hit him casually. Fatty's attacks were ruthless and decisive, and he specialized in hitting the vital points of life points. He was quite an expert. Weilinger explained. Don't look at how cheap Fatty is usually, but he was a professional fitness coach before the end of the world. Other people will become hungry and thinner in the end of the world, but this fat man is lucky that his muscles have gained weight and turned into fat. Mewtwo couldn't laugh or cry. Other people are getting thinner and thinner, how come fat people are still growing in reverse? Just for fun. Weilinger rolled her eyes and complained. Every time he comes back from a mission, this fat man eats and drinks a lot. After the meal, he goes to find women. He eats and drinks excessively and is extravagant. If he is not fat, who is fat? As she said that, Weilinger once again thought of the entertainment club that Mewtwo had asked about, and looked at Mewtwo with suspicious eyes. You won't be as dirty as him, right? Mewtwo hurriedly waved her hand. How is that possible? Is he still a baby now? How could a gentleman like him, a peerless good man, do such a thing? Looking at the battle in the distance, Song Kongwa was already covered in blood, and he was even more of a zombie than a zombie. The surrounding zombies fell into pieces, and their limbs were torn to pieces everywhere. Only a few scattered zombies were still launching fierce attacks on them. On Fatty's side, a zombie dog had been beaten to the point where it lay on the ground with its head on its back, not knowing whether it was alive or dead. The other one was blinded in one eye, but it was also covered in scars and dripping with blood. It was obvious that it could not last much longer. The battle has come to an end, and everyone's vigilance can't help but be greatly reduced. But at this moment, a sudden change occurred. A short yellow figure rushed out from the grass on the side of the road, and like an arrow from a string, it pounced on concubine Lu Qing, who was standing aside before anyone could react. When everyone reacted, the short figure shining with cold light was no more than an inch away from Lu Qingfei's delicate and fair cheeks. Click! A ray of ice blocked the attack of the short figure. A slightly cold touch passed across Lu Qingfei's face, and then shot straight towards the attacking short yellow figure. The light blue ice pick hit the short yellow figure's calf like a thunderbolt. Immediately, the frost hit like a wave, freezing the figure into ice in an instant. This icy blue ice cone is very familiar to Lu Qingfei. She suddenly turned her head and looked behind her, only to see Mewtwo standing there quietly, with an outstretched arm still wrapped with strands of ice blue cold air. Mewtwo's eyes narrowed into crescent moons, and she smiled at concubine Lu Qing and said, "If you don't stay vigilant at all times, there will be danger, my holy lady." Seeing that the danger was over, Lu Qingfei's tensed nerves slowly relaxed. But upon hearing Mewtwo's slightly teasing words, concubine Lu Qing frowned slightly again. She didn't like Mewtwo's sarcastic tone. But he still said to Mewtwo, "Thank you, I will be careful." After saying that, concubine Lu Qing turned her head to look at the short yellow figure wrapped in ice on the ground. It turns out that this is a dark yellow kitten with the head length of an ordinary person. It's just that this kitten has obviously been highly mutated. Half of its face is so rotten that you can clearly see the squirming maggots inside. It has a ferocious face, 2 baby teeth are protruding and curved, and a pair of sharp claws on its front feet are shining with a strange cold light. Okay Mewtwo, your reaction speed is second to none. Fatty had just finished dealing with the 2 mutated giant dogs. He happened to see Mewtwo condensing ice picks to deal with the mutated cats, and stepped forward to praise them. Little brother Mew is worthy of being the awakener of the elemental system. He will put us to shame as soon as he uses this method. Chen Weo said with a smile. Mewtwo, I saved Sister Qingfei, I'll give you a head start. Weilinger patted her petite chest, feeling a little scared. Lu Qingfei is a rare member of the medical team. If something goes wrong, they will not be able to escape the blame. Besides, Weilinger was also very happy to see the relationship between Mewtwo and Lu Qingfei easing. Song Kongwa came forward covered in blood and asked with concern, "Concubine Qing, are you okay?" Concubine Lu Qing shook her head and said nothing. Then Song Kongwa looked at the mutated kitten frozen in the ice, with a hint of surprise in his eyes. Although this mutated cat was not very strong and only looked like a sea-level cat, it was surprisingly fast. At first, no one except Mewtwo could react. But Mewtwo not only reacted in time, but also killed it with one blow. Even he, a peak B-level awakener, couldn't do this. TCH, Elemental Awakener. This guy is so lucky. Sensing something strange about concubine Lu Qing, Song Kongwa looked at Mewtwo with a hint of jealousy in his eyes. 7 people gathered at the entrance of the street, but there was no one around, and the air was filled with the fresh smell of blood. Concubine Lu Qing noticed that both Fatty and Song Kongwa had some scars on their bodies. After Song Kongwa transformed into a werewolf, his consciousness became violent. He was really like a jungle beast with thick fur and blood. He fought with zombies in every possible way and had the most scars on his body. Some have even been contaminated with the blood of zombies. Although they will not mutate again without treatment, they will still be infected by the virus to a certain extent. The battle between the fat man and the 2 zombie dogs was very fist to bone, and he also suffered a lot of injuries. Lu Qingfei quickly used her bandage power to heal Song Kongwa and Fatty's injuries one by one. He saw that the wounds on the 2 of them were healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Fatty was amazed at this. It's great to have an awakened person with healing ability in the team. Usually we can only handle this kind of injury ourselves. It's really convenient to have Dr. Lu in the team. If you ask Dr. Lu, you should just join our team. Lu Qingfei just smiled slightly at this, glanced at Mewtwo, and said in a teasing tone, "I'm afraid there are still people who don't want me to join." Mewtwo spread her hands and said with a smile, "How could that be? I believe this journey will be much more interesting with you." Okay, we can't stay here too long. The smell of blood will attract heretics from other areas, and then we'll be in trouble. Weilinger warned aloud that it was not suitable to stay for too long in a neighborhood where zombies gathered. Everyone knew it, and Fatty couldn't wait to dig out the crystal cores from the zombies around him. What is slightly disappointing is that the explosion rate of crystal cores in these ordinary zombies is too low. It took dozens of zombies to dig out 10 white crystal cores. On the other hand, the 2B level mutant zombie dogs each have a light yellow energy crystal core in their lower jaws. As soon as the fat man dug it out, he beamed with joy and said to Weilinger, "Speaking of Linger, I caught these 2 myself. I can't share one too much, right?" Weilinger replied with sharp teeth, "No. We agreed that these crystal cores will be distributed after returning to the base. Please be calm." The fat man wanted to cry but had no tears, and the despair in his eyes was about to overflow. After hastily putting away the crystal core, everyone hurriedly left. Along the way, Weilinger gave Mewtwo some common sense about the search team's outing. Only then did Mewtwo realize that the so-called search team went out in batches. There are more than a dozen teams like theirs going out this time, and the cities responsible for searching are also different. Mewtwo's Demon Glanshan team is mainly responsible for several areas in Linan City, and the task of finding Lu Qingfei's fiancé is just a sideline. Due to its location in a remote suburb, there were far fewer zombies on the streets than in the urban center, and there were no traces of high-level heretical monsters. Mewtwo and others were moving much faster. Mewtwo didn't even take action a few times. The only times he took action were to release ice picks to kill a few zombies blocking the way. On the way, several people passed by a large supermarket. After an inspection by the mutant sparrow, Mao Mao, summoned by Shu Wen, they found that there were thousands of ferocious zombies inside. The few people who learned the information did not dare to go near this place anymore and quickly took a detour. Thousands of zombies are already extremely terrifying, not to mention that there is a high probability that high-level zombies may be born inside, which is far beyond what the current 7-person team can resist. But before leaving, Weilinger took out the tablet with the map and marked something again on it. When Mewtwo saw this scene, she couldn't help but ask questions. But Weilinger didn't seem to understand very well, so she just said, "We were reminded to mark the dangerous areas we find on the map and report them after we return. It's really strange." A glint flashed in Mewtwo's eyes, as if she had thought of something, but she remained silent. After walking for nearly 2 hours, the group finally arrived at the first location of their trip, Lannan Third People's Hospital according to the map's guidance. Strange, why do I feel as soon as I come here, it's so eerie. As soon as the fat man reached the iron gate of the hospital, he shuddered and stopped. Weilinger rolled her eyes at him and said disdainfully, "Stop saying such depressing words, Wenwen." Shu Wen was teasing the squirrel on her shoulder. When Shu Wen heard Weilinger's call, she immediately understood and whistled softly to call out the mutated sparrow named Mau Mau. After receiving the order, the little sparrow disappeared over the hospital in a flash. A few minutes later, the sparrow flew back and stayed on Shu Wen's shoulder and chirped a few times. Shu Wen calmed the sparrow for a while and then said, "The news from Mau Mau is very strange. The hospital seems to be very quiet, there is no sound at all. Look, I'm just saying, there must be something fishy here, why don't we go in?" The fat man backed down at this time. "I'm scared to death, maybe all the zombies inside have escaped." Song Kongwa sneered at the fat man, obviously not taking the dangers lurking in the hospital seriously at all. A rare look of confusion appeared on Weilinger's pretty face. After thinking for a moment, she said, "Let's go in and investigate first. If there is any danger, get out immediately." Everyone thought about it and felt that it was feasible, so they all recommended the fat man to be the vanguard. The fat man looked at the hazy sky above the hospital, with black lines on his face, and said sadly, "You can't play with me, can you?" But now that the matter was over, the fat man could only grit his teeth and push open the dilapidated and mottled iron door of the hospital. The hall of the hospital has long been in dilapidated condition. In addition, it is located in a remote place and it is dusk and sunset. There has been no sunlight inside for a long time, which makes it feel particularly strange and eerie. Lannan City has long been turned into an urban ruin, and the power supply system has completely collapsed. The elevator in the hospital has long been paralyzed, and everyone can only rely on the escalator to go up. The dark corridor had a strange atmosphere, exuding a lifeless smell of decay, and the handrails were covered with dust. Shu Wen carefully pulled the corner of Weilinger's clothes. Even the fat man walking in front had his calves trembling and looked back from time to time. I say we should go back, if we can't find another hospital." The fat man swallowed hard, his confidence seemed a little lacking. "Useless trash, get out of my way." Song Kongwa impatiently pushed the fat man aside, took out a flashlight from the backpack behind him, and turned to lead the way. The fat man naturally had no objection to this and ran behind happily. The atmosphere in the quiet and dark corridor of the hospital was particularly depressing, but the short few dozen stairs seemed to take a long time. Only the sound of heavy breathing echoed in everyone's ears. As awakened ones, what they are really afraid of is not this strange and silent atmosphere, but the unknown dangers ahead. Several people walked through the corridor to the corridor on the second floor. There were still no living people or zombies, and there was no movement. It was as if time had completely stopped in this hospital. "Something's wrong." Chen, the oldest member of the team, finally spoke. He was experienced and knew immediately that something was wrong. How can there be no one in such a big hospital? Even if they have turned into zombies, they will not all run away. But Song Kongwa didn't want to give up halfway and said angrily, "We've all come this far. Whoever wants to leave can leave. Anyway, I won't leave." After saying that, he immediately started searching the wards on both sides. Seeing this, Chen Liu opened his mouth but didn't say anything. He could only sigh and followed Song Kong into the ward. Mu Chu turned to the fat man next to her and asked, "Has he always been like this?" The fat man whispered in Mu Chu's ear, "Rebellious boys in adolescence, you know." He also pretended to be profound and said, "And these young people lack maternal love, so they have a sentimental attachment to mature women like Dr. Liu." Mu Chu raised her eyes and looked around at concubine Liu Qing's proud figure, and nodded knowingly. It's quite mature. What are you talking about? Hurry up and follow me." Weilinger yelled when she saw Fatty and Mu Chu whispering behind them. The remaining people also split up and opened the doors of the wards and began to search. Mu Chu opened the door and walked into a room. The door number in front of the room was marked as the nurse's lounge. As soon as he opened the door, a strong smell of disinfectant and decay hit his face. It was obvious that no one had opened the door to this room for a long time. Miu Chu pinched her nose and looked at the small room, which was less than 50 square meters. There is an iron table at the entrance, and in the corner is a small bed large enough for one person to lie flat on his back. Next to it is a huge glass cabinet filled with unknown glass medicines. Miu Chu observed that there was a pool of old blood that had dried up in the corner next to the bed. It was obvious that this was caused by the zombie attack during the apocalypse. Even the iron table was covered with broken glass shards, and the stools in the room were overturned to the ground. The whole room showed signs of the chaos of a fight. Interesting, this place has obviously been attacked by zombies, but not even a corpse can be seen. Miu Chu raised the corners of his mouth and rubbed his chin, which was his usual thinking posture. After a while, Miu Chu walked out of the room and came to the counter in the corridor on the second floor of the hospital. Old blood stains can still be found here, and Miu Chu even carefully discovered that there were deep scratches on the counter caused by fingernail scratches. Miu Chu sat on the counter seat, closed her eyes, and instantly activated the power of the sheep spell. Soul out of body. A pale red cloud-like soul emerged from Miu Chu's body, and gradually condensed into Miu Chu's face. As soon as Miu Chu's soul emerged, she felt the inexplicable coldness in the hospital that only souls could feel. The existence of souls is illusory. Miu Chu manipulated the souls to directly enter the wards through the walls to explore. Soon, the entire room on the second floor was penetrated by him, but still no usable clues were found. He immediately penetrated the ceiling and reached the room above the second floor. This time, his speed was faster, and he shuttled through the rooms almost as fast as the wind. As expected, all the rooms were empty, and some were even in a mess, with various instruments and medicines broken on the floor, but there was no body in sight. What the hell is going on here? Just when Miu Chu was about to explore deeply, his soul suddenly seemed to feel something, and it quickly returned to the body after exploring the ground. On the way, Miu Chu's soul passed right through the fat man who had just walked out of the room. Being penetrated by the cold breath of the soul, the fat man shivered directly, wrapped his coat more tightly, and muttered, "Why is it so cold in the summer? I'm just saying there's definitely something weird about this place." The fat man muttered something, and then he saw Miu Chu, who was sitting at the counter and had just returned from the ghost. The fat man pointed at Miu Chu and said angrily, "Okay Miu Chu, we are all searching for resources, but you are lazy here. Don't think that because you are an awakened person of the elemental system, I dare not speak to you. Our team has no precedent of raising lazy people." The fat man seemed to have caught Miu Chu's hand. Just as he was about to say something else, he saw two figures, one large and one small, walking towards the stairs in the distance. The fat man was so frightened that he jumped up and hid behind Miu Chu. Miu Chu didn't know whether to laugh or cry, and waved her hands at the two figures. When the two figures approached, they realized that it was Weilinger holding the hand of little Lolita Shu Wen and walking towards them. The fat man gave a false alarm and wiped the cold sweat from his forehead, with an unnatural expression on his face. Weilinger asked curiously, "What are you doing?" "Fatty. No, it's nothing." He would never admit that he was afraid of the weird atmosphere in this hospital. Soon, concubine Lu Qing and Lao Chen also walked down. Weilinger asked hurriedly, "Sister Qingfei, how is the situation?" Lu Qingfei had a smile on her face. "It's not bad. The medicines in this hospital are well preserved, and there are even several instruments that can operate." "Very good." Weilinger jumped up excitedly and hugged Lu Qingfei's fair neck, looking like she was having a great harvest. These medical instruments are rare and expensive equipment in the Yuhai base. If the search team can bring them back during a trip, they can exchange them for a lot of high-end crystal cores. At this time, Lao Chen stepped forward with a solemn look on his face. "Has any of you seen Song Kongwa?" The fat man asked. "Old Chen, weren't you with him just now?" Old Chen shook his head, looking annoyed. "We searched the rooms upstairs together and found no clues, so he asked someone to go to the morgue on the basement floor to have a look. I couldn't stop him." Song Kongwa went to the morgue on the ground floor. Everyone exclaimed, no matter what, the morgue was a notorious and forbidden place on Earth before the end of the world. Mentioning it in this weird and spooky hospital instantly makes one feel numb. "I see." Miu Chu seemed to have thought of something, and the eyes of several people were instantly attracted. Miu Chu sighed softly and said with emotion, I think the reason why this hospital is so strange must be in this morgue. The perception of the soul would not deceive him. Since Miu Chu could clearly sense the cold aura after her soul left the body, there must be something weird about this hospital. On the surface, all the rooms in this hospital seem to be fine, but the biggest weirdness probably comes from the most sinister place in the hospital, the morgue. In that case, let's go there and have a look together. Wei Ling'er's pretty face couldn't help but have a look of caution. At this moment, she had already felt the strangeness of this hospital, but as the captain of the team, she could never give up on Song Kongwa so easily. I said, do we really want to go? The fat man's calves were trembling a little at the moment, but looking at the people who had left, he still suppressed his fear and chased after them. Hey, wait for me. It was already sunset, and there was no light in the dim corridor. Only the footsteps of a few people echoed in the empty hospital. In every ward on both sides, there seemed to be a pair of invisible eyes staring at Miu Chu and others through the windows, and deep in the corridor in front was a bottomless abyss black hole, which opened its dark mouth and was about to swallow several people. People devour it cleanly. You never know what's staring back at you from the abyss. Miu Chu suddenly spoke, and the fat man behind him shivered in fright. What are you doing? The fat man became angry. Miu Chu said amusedly, why are you not as courageous as a girl? Normally you are not even afraid of zombies and monsters, but now a deserted hospital scares you like this. Is there something wrong in your heart? As soon as these words came out, Wei Ling'er, Lu Qingfei, and Xu Wen who were standing next to them covered their mouths and chuckled. The fat man swallowed his saliva, but still said harshly, I just caught a cold recently and am feeling a little unwell. The farce relaxed the solemn atmosphere of the scene a lot. Old Chen took the lead and turned on the flashlight and walked carefully along the handrail of the corridor, followed by everyone. Pushing open the door to the underground floor, a strong rancid smell hit their faces. Several girls immediately pinched their noses and looked embarrassed. The morgue of Linan Third People's Hospital is the largest among the 3 surrounding areas, half the size of a parking lot. Bodies that died due to various circumstances are placed here before being cremated. After Lao Chen explained his understanding to everyone, he took out a device the size of a remote control from his bag, with red dots still glowing on the screen. I was worried about Konghua's whereabouts before and gave him a locator, but now it comes in handy. Everyone followed the guidance of the positioning instrument and arrived at the door of a morgue with room 1 inch hanging on the door. The door was ajar, leaving traces of someone entering not long ago. Miu Chu had an inexplicable feeling that as she approached the room, the cold aura gradually became more intense. At this moment, Lao Chen stretched out his arm, and an arc-shaped barrier blocked everyone. Lao Chen looked at Wei Ling'er, and when the latter nodded, he said in a deep voice, everyone, be careful. After saying that, he pushed open the heavy iron door of the morgue. Kongwa. As soon as Lao Chen opened the door, he saw Song Kongwa lying on the ground, covered in blood. At this time, Song Kongwa had turned into a werewolf form, but he fell to the ground in an extremely weak state, with scars and blood all over his body. His hands were still stretched out, and he lay on the ground without any life. The fat man quickly ran over and helped Song Kongwa up, and Lu Qingfei immediately transformed a healing bandage to treat Song Konghua's injuries. Song Kongwa, who was helped up, opened his eyes immediately, pointed in one direction and shouted, quick, get out of here. After hearing this, everyone looked in the direction of Song Konghua's finger, and Lao Chen even shined the light of his flashlight in it. Jia, 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 Jia. There was an eerie grinding sound, and at the end of the room of more than 100 square meters, there was a row of corpse lockers several meters high, used to store corpses. In front of the corpse cabinet, a huge creature more than 10 feet tall was sitting. He was opening the cabinet door, grabbing a corpse, and chewing the bones and flesh. What kind of monster is this? Fatty said tremblingly. The light of the flashlight shone over, and the behemoth several meters tall was attracted by the light, stopped eating, and turned its head to look at everyone. Only then did a few people see the true face of this behemoth. This is a tall meatball, with fat piled all over the body. The neck is almost invisible due to the thick fat accumulation, and its limbs can only be vaguely recognized from the connecting parts of the tendon sheaths. What's even worse is that the head on top of its body looks like a baby. It's just that the baby's head is as huge as its body, its eyes are hollow and deep, and its mouth is grinning with a childlike smile. It's just that this childish smile looks extremely weird when placed on a huge body. The unchanging weird smile and the hollow and deep pupils looked particularly eerie in this dark morgue. At the same time that its body was illuminated by the light, the giant monster baby also discovered traces of Mewtwo and others. As if seeing some fresh food, the giant strange baby reached out to pick up the corpse in the cabinet, opened its mouth to a degree that ordinary people could not imagine, exposed its fangs, and swallowed the corpse in one gulp. Cluck, cluck. Blood flowed out from the corners of its closed mouth like delicious sauce. The strange baby walked toward the people with short steps. It was still chewing in its mouth, making an oozing, squeaking sound. A level. Feeling the powerful energy fluctuations released by the strange baby, Wei Ling bit her silver teeth and instantly analyzed the level of this terrifying heresy. Take Song Kongwa with you and prepare to retreat. Wei Ling gave the order without much thought. Fatty and Lao Chen nodded. One carried Song Kongwa and ran away with the remaining people, while the other set up a barrier to protect the others from evacuating. Seeing that everyone has retreated to the edge of the iron gate. Be careful of what it's capable of. Song Kongwa reminded him loudly. Just when everyone was confused about the meaning, the huge strange baby waved its short arm, and the thick iron door closed instantly with a snap. It is a spiritual heresy, with a level of at least A level. It is much more difficult to deal with than an ordinary A-level heresy. Song Kongwa had briefly recovered after treatment, and then he explained the strange baby's ability to everyone. Chapter 31. What? After hearing Song Konghua's analysis, everyone looked shocked. Even Mewtwo's eyes showed excitement, looking at the huge monster baby like a mountain of flesh with eager eyes. Specializing in the spiritual abilities of the soul has always been his shortcoming, and now he finally encountered a spiritual heresy. This ability, the ability to make up for the shortcomings of his soul, is too tempting for him. Be sure to eat it. Just when Mewtwo was thinking about how to eat this spiritual heretic without revealing his true identity. This strange baby also showed its blood-stained white teeth, and looked at everyone as if it were a young child staring at the food on the plate. Kekeki. Suddenly, an invisible spiritual attack pierced the sky and hit Lao Zhong's condensed barrier shield directly. The light blue shield that looked extremely strong dimmed in an instant, and then shattered without any stagnation. Lao Zhong was the first to bear the brunt. He was whipped several meters away by this spiritual force and hit the wall directly behind him. The aftermath of the attack hit the people behind Lao Chen like air cannonballs. Suddenly, Mewtwo's palms fluctuated, forming an ice wall to block the crowd. The invisible shock impact instantly collided with the ice wall. The ice wall as tall as a person cracked in an instant, and the aftermath of the shock was also offset by the explosion. Mewtwo took back her slightly numb palms. Sure enough, the human body's physique was still far inferior to that of the fire demon lord who had evolved into a monster. This monster baby is only at level A. If it were in the Balrog state, he could crush it to death with one hand. But now he couldn't reveal his identity in front of others. He wanted to defeat this troublesome monster baby with only his B-level ice power and his body in human form. Xiaoxi Mewtwo also felt a little headache. At this moment, a figure passed by Mewtwo as fast as the wind. Mewtwo took a closer look and saw that this figure was Wei Ling who had transformed into a civet. Wei Ling's body flashed and she was already in front of the strange baby. Her open nails turned into furry cat claws and she swooped towards the strange baby's head. Meow. Following Wei Ling's cooing sound, a pair of sharp claws were less than 2 feet away from the big-headed monster baby. The strange baby stared blankly at Wei Ling's flying figure, opening its big mouth as if looking at a novel toy. But the next moment, Wei Ling's cat's claw seemed to hit an invisible barrier, and the two collided with each other, making the sound of gold and iron clashing. Wei Ling's swift cat claws thrust out crazily, shooting fierce sparks on the invisible barrier in the air, but she was unable to break through the invisible barrier composed of telepathy. Giggle. The strange baby suddenly grinned and looked at Wei Ling with its empty, dark eyes. A short fleshy hand grabbed the cat girl who was struggling to stab her. When Wei Ling saw this, she hurriedly dodged back. The strange baby grasped the empty hand, and a look of impatience suddenly appeared on its face. It lay on the ground and crawled toward Wailing with its hands and feet. Shu Wen, who was standing far away, saw Wailing in danger. Although her face was frightened, she still suppressed her fear. Shu Wen patted the squirrel on her shoulder, whispered something, and then put the squirrel on the ground. As soon as this unattractive-looking squirrel, no bigger than an ordinary person's hand, landed on the ground, it quickly expanded in size, until it was finally big enough to be as big as a beast like an ox or a horse. As the squirrel grew bigger, its eyes also turned red, its hair exploded and its face became ferocious, and finally it rushed towards the big-headed monster baby and bit it. Fat man, go and help Ling Er. Concubine Lu Qing noticed that the fat man beside her had not yet taken action and quickly urged him. The fat man looked at the terrifying monster baby in front of him, swallowed hard, took a heavy breath, and then his body stagnated and the person disappeared from the spot. At the same time, Song Kongwa saw concubine Lu Qing calling the fat man for help, biting her silver teeth, and her body was shocked. The dark blue mane stretched to her face, and her white fangs were exposed, and she transformed into a werewolf form again. Song Kongwa roared, and immediately followed the fat man and pounced on him. When concubine Lu Qing saw Song Kongwa was seriously injured and still fighting, she wanted to stop him, but before she could say anything, Song Kongwa had disappeared. She sighed softly and looked at Mu Chu with hopeful eyes. Mu Chu raised a smile and looked at concubine Lu Qing. Don't worry, my holy mother, I will take action no matter what this time. For a full meal. After saying that, the wind blew under Mu Chu's feet, and the black windbreaker she was wearing also fluttered. Seeing Mu Chu also taking action, Lu Qingfei breathed a sigh of relief and smiled happily. Then he looked at the people fighting in front with worried eyes. The fat man's superpower was good at speed. In just a few moves, his slightly bloated body had already collided with the monster baby's huge body. The fat man wore a steel finger tiger in his hand, and cleverly used dark power to punch the strange baby on the thigh. So hard, the fat man felt as if the punch had hit a mountain of flesh. The spikes on the finger tiger could not penetrate the strange baby's mutated skin. Instead, the shock force from the finger tiger made the fat man's arm numb. Jia, although the strange baby was not harmed, it was obviously angered by the food that was harassing it. It waved its physical hand and fired a telepathic attack like a tentacle across the air. Before the fat man could react, an invisible whip had already struck him, and he was instantly whipped to the ground. Immediately, another powerful wave struck, this time the target was directly the fat man's head. The fat man felt a strong wind coming from his ears. He endured the severe pain on his skin and rolled on the spot. The ground around him shattered with a rumbling, and a deep ravine was left. Shu Wen's giant squirrel was also spread out by an invisible force of thought the moment it attacked the monster baby, and was immediately blasted away by the monster baby's impatient palm. Song Kongwa, who was following the fat man, saw that the strange baby's eyes were completely attracted by the fat man. His eyes lit up, and he waved the sharp claws on his fist bones and attacked the strange baby's back. At the same time, Wailing who had been let go by the strange baby, seized the opportunity and swooped up to grab the strange baby's neck. Two squeaking sounds were heard, and the sharp claws instantly pierced the monster baby's neck and back. In an instant, two pools of blood flew out. Roar! The big-headed monster roared in pain, and could no longer maintain the weird smile on its face. It turned its head with a ferocious expression and swung its fists at the two of them irrationally. Wailing and Song Kongwa staggered away from the monster baby's huge physical fist. At this time, they were at the moment when their old strength had just been exhausted and new strength had not yet been born. But in the next second, two more mental attacks came straight towards the two of them. A mental attack hit the seriously injured Song Kongwa like a cannonball, and he subconsciously raised his arms to protect his head. Just hearing a loud boom, a light yellow screen lit up and blocked Song Kongwa's front. Song Kongwa turned around to look, and saw Chen Weo, who had been knocked away by telekinesis from the beginning, leaning against the wall next to him, condensing a barrier to help him block the fatal blow. But Wailing on the other side was not so lucky. She swooped down and attacked the monster baby's neck. At this moment, she just jumped into the air, with no chance of escaping. Linger! Lao Chen roared. Wailing was too far away from him, and he no longer had the strength to form a barrier for Wei Ling to resist the attack. Wei Ling also knew that this blow was inevitable as she was in the air, but she still exerted force on her feet in an attempt to avoid this fatal blow. But at this moment, another mental attack came from behind, and the powerful wave swept in like a howling north wind, carrying an unparalleled and powerful power. It's over. Wei Ling knew that she was at the end of the road, her pretty face turned pale, and she closed her eyes in despair. Are you going to die? At this moment, Wei Ling recalled many things. In the end of the world, she has lost a lot of things, but because of this, she can better understand the preciousness of life. The figures of her former comrades, family, and friends appeared in her mind one by one, and she suddenly felt reluctant to leave this world. There was a trace of tears on her pretty face, and Wei Ling's face was full of reluctance and regret. Miss, why are you so sentimental? The expected severe pain did not come, but instead a voice as gentle as jade came to her ears. The next moment, she felt herself entering a warm embrace. Wei Ling slowly opened her eyes, with tears still dripping from the corners of her eyes. What caught her eye was a handsome face, and this face was all too familiar to her. It was she who led him into the Yuhai base in the first place. Miu Chu, Wei Ling murmured subconsciously, her pair of cat ears twitching slightly, and her expression was one of trance that had never appeared on her face before. Miu Chu wrapped her left hand around Wei Ling's slender waist and pulled her into her arms. She stretched out her right hand to form a crystal blue ice wall to resist the impact of the strange baby's telepathy. The huge storm caused by the collision swept across the entire room in an instant, making the originally silent room seem even more empty. The black windbreaker was fluttering, and Miu Chu slowly jumped down from the air with Wei Ling in her arms. Her expression hidden by her broken hair was surprisingly calm. Why can he be so calm? Song Kongwa saw Miu Chu descending to earth like a god from the side, and an inexplicable look flashed in his eyes. After bringing Wei Ling to the ground, Miu Chu couldn't help but feel amused when she saw that the girl was still looking at him in a daze. Wiping away the tears from the corners of the girl's eyes, Miu Chu reminded, "Hey, miss, it's almost time for you to come down, right?" Wei Ling was awakened by Miu Chu's words, and then she realized that she was still being held in Miu Chu's arms. She instantly blushed with embarrassment and hurriedly stood up. Miu Chu didn't seem to notice Wei Ling's strange behavior, but instead looked at the crazy big-headed monster baby not far away. It's almost time to end this farce. As Miu Chu spoke, she spread her arms horizontally in front of her body, with crystal light blue shimmering in her fists. As Miu Chu unfolded his arms, a magnificent and clear blue ice sword appeared in Miu Chu's palm. If you still have the strength, let's go together. Miu Chu narrowed her eyes and looked at the strange baby with a touch of fire in her eyes. Wei Ling's cat ears stood up. The next moment, Miu Chu held an ice sword and slashed towards the strange baby quickly. Wei Ling followed closely behind with sharp cat claws. I'm coming too. At this time, the fat man got a meteor hammer from nowhere, and instantly activated his super speed moving ability. He turned violently and transformed into a huge top with sharp blades all over it. The huge gyro spun on the spot and rolled towards the strange baby very quickly. At this time, how could Song Kongwa succumb to others? After a slight pause, he opened his sharp claws and pounced forward again. Before the big-headed monster baby could recover from the severe pain in its neck and back, it saw several people attacking it again. The strange baby was furious, its face full of innocence and childishness was full of ferocious color, and it got up directly from the ground. I saw his two physical hands waving in front of him, and invisible spiritual energy emerged, and the powerful spiritual energy turned into human faces. The human faces composed of spiritual power are of different ages, including decrepit old people and childish children. But their faces are filled with hatred, sorrow, anger, hatred, pain and other emotions, as if they are a combination of negative emotions. Just like that, the distorted human faces were floating in the air, and following the command of the strange baby, they rushed towards a few people. Several people knew that being hit by this kind of spiritual power involving the soul level would be extremely dangerous, so they tried their best to dodge when faced with the overwhelming terrifying faces. At this moment, Chen Weo, who was leaning against the wall, was recovering from his injuries under Lu Qingfei's treatment. He took out a rifle from his arms and started shooting wildly at the big-headed monster baby. The hail of bullets hit the monster baby's mountain-like body like a rain curtain, but the monster baby's iron-clad body was naturally not injured at all. But the strange baby was still affected by these bullets, and it was difficult to control the strange faces composed of spiritual power that filled the sky. Song Kongwa found the opportunity, jumped up, jumped into the air, swung the sharp blade on his fist and stabbed the strange baby directly in the eye socket. Blood flowed out from the corners of the strange baby's eyes like pillars. The big-headed monster baby screamed, covered his eyes and fell backwards. At the same time, the human flesh top composed of the fat man also flew into the air at high speed and hit the strange baby's back wound hard. The giant squirrel controlled by Shu Wen also recovered and bit the strange baby's hind legs with red eyes. The old wounds haven't healed yet, new wounds have been added. The big-headed monster baby looked up to the sky and screamed. It was completely angered now. It didn't expect that these foods that he regarded as meals could actually hurt him so much. A flash of red flashed in the strange baby's eyes, and he spread his fingers as if he was about to unleash a killer move. Miu Chu's eyes moved slightly, and a terrifying red figure flashed in the depths of his pupils. In an instant, a terrifying pressure that only heretical monsters could feel turned into waves and passed over the body of the big-headed monster baby. The big-headed monster baby felt this tremor coming from the depths of its soul, and for the first time a look of horror and fear appeared in its pupils. At this moment of stagnation, Miu Chu seized the opportunity, jumped up with an ice sword in hand, and pierced the big-headed monster baby's chest fiercely. Time seemed to stand still at this moment. In the silent and empty morgue, only the rapid and restless breathing of the people could be heard. Click. The next moment, the ice sword in Miu Chu's palm shattered. At the same time, the wound on the big-headed monster baby's chest was suddenly frozen into ice, and soon the ice spread towards the monster baby's huge body at a cracking speed. In just a few breaths, the whole body of the big-headed monster baby had been frozen into ice. Is it finally over? Chen Weo stood up from the wall with support. The arm holding the rifle was surprisingly heavy. Well done, Miu Chu. The fat man jumped forward and looked at the frozen big-headed monster baby in front of him. He felt that the haze in his heart had been dispelled a lot. The strange baby's face still had an angry and twisted look, but there was a strange look of horror and fear in the depths of his pupils. However, Wei Ling'er's pair of cat eyes noticed this keenly, and she walked closer and looked at the big-headed monster baby with a confused expression. What is it afraid of? Is it death? Concubine Lu Qing also came over at this time, with a gentle smile on her face. Thank you for your hard work, Miu Chu. After all, it was Miu Chu who dealt the fatal blow to the big-headed monster baby. Otherwise, judging from his posture and using another big move, I am afraid that there will inevitably be casualties among the members present. Miu Chu also had an inexplicable smile on her lips. No need to thank me, this is what I should do. Judging from the appearance of the two of them, they look like a harmonious and friendly brother and sister. How can they still have the awkward atmosphere of being at war with each other before? Whispering sound. Song Kongwa couldn't stand this scene. He snorted and walked past Miu Chu with a trace of resentment in his eyes. It was obviously him who gave the strange baby a heavy blow first, but all the credit went to Miu Chu, a newcomer. Despite this, Song Kongwa, who passed by Miu Chu, skillfully took out a dagger from his pocket and was about to take out the crystal core from the big-headed monster baby. I advise you not to do this. Miu Chu's indifferent voice came from behind. Song Kongwa turned his head angrily, but what he saw was Miu Chu's indifferent face. Miu Chu glanced at Song Kongwa, and Miu Chu could clearly see the hatred towards him in the latter's eyes, but this kind of role did not allow him to distinguish between him and Song Kongwa. This heretic is just frozen by me now, but this is far from enough to kill it. It could break out at any time. What? As soon as this statement came out, everyone present was horrified. Then why don't you run away quickly? The fat man suddenly gained strength at this time. Fighting with this kind of monster would undoubtedly kill him. If he hadn't considered the other people present, he would have run away without looking back. Several people looked at each other and finally decided to evacuate this place of right and wrong first. Before leaving, Miu Chu, who was at the end of the team, once again looked at the big-headed monster baby who was frozen like an iceberg, with a meaningful smile hanging on the corner of his mouth. Shortly after everyone in the team left, a strange scene happened. The iceberg that sealed the monster baby's huge body in the distance slowly melted, but as the ice melted, the big-headed monster baby's body showed a strange dark purple color, starting from the head and eroding all the way to the monster baby's body. That's not all. This unnatural dark purple color continues to deepen as it spreads, gradually turning into pitch black like a black hole. Wow! The strange baby let out a painful scream, but before the sound spread, the darkness swallowed up all its body, and its body began to wither and dim at a speed visible to the naked eye. The originally huge body shrank in the blink of an eye, just like a plant losing nutrients, and its appearance also became withered and thin in an instant. Just like that, in a few breaths, the big-headed monster baby was sucked into a shriveled mummy. At this time, Mewtwo, who had followed the team out of the hospital, suddenly let out a long sigh of relief, and a blush appeared on his face. Psychic powers. Now he finally has some abilities targeting soul powers. What made him even more delighted was that after devouring the big-headed monster baby, his ice powers were also upgraded to the A-level level. It was already dark at this time, and even when I walked out of the hospital, it was still dark outside. We need to find a place to stay as soon as possible. The zombies will be particularly active at night. Chen Liu was supported by the fat man and said that his injury had not been completely healed after Lu Qingfei's treatment. Several people quickly found an apartment next to the hospital. After cleaning up the zombies inside, they found a relatively clean room to rest. During this period, Lu Qingfei continued to use her powers to treat everyone, even if she was sweating profusely and her face was pale. Among the members of the team, Lu Qingfei and Wei Ling'er were the least injured, followed by Fatty. He was so wide and fat that even if he was hit a few times, it wouldn't be a big deal. However, Chen Liu and Song Konghua in the team were the most seriously injured. Chen Liu himself was already middle-aged, and his physical fitness was not as good as that of young people like them. And because he stood in front of everyone, he was hit by the strange baby's first attack. He was directly thrown away and hit the wall hard. Although Chen Weiguo's supernatural powers are good at defense, his physical strength is still at the human level even though it has been modified by supernatural energy and is stronger than ordinary people. Song Konghua was severely injured by the big-headed monster baby and fell to the ground before anyone arrived. After Lu Qingfei's simple treatment, he managed to hold himself up and fight again. Even though he is a physically powerful awakened person of the mutation system, his body is still unable to bear such a huge consumption. Just when Mewtwo's team was recuperating, they were far away on the street in another neighborhood. In this dim night, smoke actually rose from the streets. In front of the door of a high-rise hotel, an oven was burning with flames, and a row of meat skewers was grilled on a charcoal fire. Several men in strange clothes were squatting next to the oven, picking up a skewer of meat and starting to eat it from time to time. Setting off bonfires in a city full of zombie heretics is something that ordinary people would never dare to think about. One of them had protruding cheekbones, a vulgar appearance, and a mustache. He was Ma Kun, the lizard man who tried every means to oppose Mewtwo. A man next to him was playing with a throwing knife, breathing heavily, and asked Ma Kun, "How about Ma Kun, since Brother Hao sent us to help you deal with that Mewtwo, what are you paying attention to?" Ma Kun didn't speak, but a short man on the other side was chewing on a meat skewer and smiled casually. "You're making too much of a fuss. It's not enough for us to deal with Wei Ling'er's B-level team, not to mention that Brother Hao sent Brother Shang here this time." As the man spoke, he looked at the muscular man who had been silent by the fire. The muscular man known as Brother Shang has a rough figure, and the muscles on his shoulders are bulging. As the strong man picks up the meat skewers and swallows them, the muscles on his shoulders are also tangled like snakes, as if they contain hidden treasures. Explosive, terrifying power. But at this moment, there were bursts of rustling and low-pitched roars coming from the distance. Groups of zombies seemed to be attracted by the smoke from the campfire, and they attacked Ma Kun and others like a group of extremely hungry beasts. Feeling the approaching horrific group of corpses, this weird team didn't panic at all. The muscular man swallowed the last bite of meat, stood up slowly, and walked towards the boundless darkness ahead filled with dangerous zombies. When Ma Kun and others saw this, they seemed to be used to it and did not make any move. The strong man roared and rushed into the zombies, his muscular body bulging like an earth dragon. He looked more like a beast than those irrational zombies. The huge fist hit a zombie, and the zombie was immediately knocked away. With a dull sound of breaking through the air, a series of zombies behind him were also knocked to the ground by the aftermath of this punch. Several zombies who fell on the ground struggled to get up, but were punched through the head by the strong man. Blood flew on the strong man's face, and only then did a look of morbid excitement appear on his dull face. Next, the strong man's face turned red, and the energy and blood in his body reached its peak in an instant. He began to roar and run towards the zombie group that could not be seen in the distance. In his eyes, hundreds of zombies were like harvesting straw. The huge fist shuttled indiscriminately among the walking dead. Blood surged and splashed like sauce, filled with a violent aesthetic that ordinary people could not imagine. Suddenly, a zombie with fast steps, sharp teeth and claws came from the group of corpses like a ghost. This is a B-level mutant zombie. The mutant zombie's sharp claws directly scratched the strong man's bulging shoulder muscles. But the strange thing is that there is no trace of blood on the strong man's shoulder, only white marks. This sharp blow did not even pierce the flesh of the muscular man. The next second, the strong man was aroused with ferocity, and he opened his mouth, revealing teeth that were soaked in blood. He suddenly grabbed the mutated zombie's thin body. Throwing it into the air, the strong man hit the mutated zombie's body with his fists like a rain of rain. The powerful punches were bombarded one after another like a barrage of cannonballs, and even the ears of Ma-kun and others could hear buzzing sounds. In just a few breaths, the mutated zombie was bleeding profusely, its arms drooped, and it looked like it could no longer die. Brother Shang really had a great time playing today. A man with a red haircut was holding a bottle of liquor in his hand. Seeing the extremely bloody scene in front of him, he drank the liquor in one gulp with a smile. The short, deformed man showed his sharp teeth and said to Ma-kun, "How do you want to deal with Weilinger and Nizi's team?" "I'd say Brother Shang alone is enough." The man with the throwing knife in his hand used the knife to show off his strength. He was obviously extremely confident in the muscular man. Because this muscular man known as Brother Shang is a serious A-level awakener. Ma-kun looked at Brother Shang, who was fighting and practicing with a group of zombies in the distance, with a calculating look in his eyes. He stroked his mustache and said with a lewd smile, "Why should Brother Shang do it himself to deal with a group of B-level awakened people? In the ruins of this city, it is normal for a team to be wiped out by zombie heretics. The night is dark and the stars are silent. It seems that only the stars in the sky can bring a little light to this lonely city." Shortly after Mu Chu and others left Linan Third People's Hospital, in the morgue on the underground floor, a strange dark wind blew in, pushing the heavy iron door open with gentle force. Immediately, a man in red robe floated in quietly. As soon as the man in red robe entered the morgue, the cold atmosphere invaded the entire room again. If the fat man were here, he would definitely feel that the cold aura emanating from this man was much stronger than that of the big-headed monster baby. The man in red robe first glanced at the messy morgue, and he could clearly see the traces of a fierce fight not long ago. Then, the man in red robe looked at the big-headed monster not far away, which had been devoured by blood and essence, turning into a withered mummy. After careful inspection, the man in red robe frowned and took out a transmitter from his arms. "This is experiment site No. 3. The experimental product code named A007 has been destroyed by an unknown person." Observing the scene, it can be found that the experimental product was destroyed by a group attack, and the method used in the fatal blow should be some kind of sharp weapon. The total number of people is about 6 to 8. The experimental subject's body turned into a mummy, and the method is somewhat similar to mine. As he spoke, the man in red robe turned his head, revealing a pale and bloodless face, and under his lips, there was a pair of fangs that looked like bats. This should be the work of some search party. Early the next morning, after a short rest, everyone did not dare to stay too long and left the apartment after recovering a little. Along the way, it was clear that Chen Huio and Song Konghua's bodies had not recovered yet. Especially Song Konghua's overloaded fighting has severely damaged his body. In addition to Lu Qingfei's treatment, he now needs the help of a fat man to walk. Therefore, Mu Chu and Weilinger were the temporary main combatants of the team. There were not many zombies in this area, and they had already cleaned them up once when they came, so there were not as many zombies as there were during the day. Occasionally, some blind zombies would attack, but Mewtwo would release the ice pick to act as a long-range shooter, and the civet transformed by Wailinger would fight them off with melee output. Looking at Mewtwo, who still looked calm in the face of the zombie attack, she stood in front of everyone like a protector, as if she was a reckless newbie. Song Konghua, who was supported by the fat man, shrank his nose and his eyes trembled slightly. He glanced at concubine Lu Qing in front of him again, with a trace of extreme unwillingness flashing in his eyes. Originally, this opportunity to show off in front of his sweetheart was clearly his. This time, the progress of clearing out the zombies was extremely fast. In less than 2 hours, Mewtwo and others were back near the off-road vehicle where they started. It stands to reason that heretics like the Morgue monster baby should not appear here in the yellow zone. We can say that we are lucky this time. Old Chen rubbed his sore waist and sighed helplessly. I don't know if there are any similar dangers here. Let's leave here and go to the next area first. Everyone got on the bus one after another, and the 2 off-road vehicles restarted, preparing to leave this dangerous area. The heavy warehouse door was opened, and inside were piles of flour and rice bags. The grains were covered with old dust, but to the eye they seemed to be covered with a layer of golden light. If I go, I will say that if you survive the catastrophe, you will be blessed later. Now we will be rich. Mewtwo's team was seen standing outside the door of a warehouse. The fat man's eyes were shining as he looked at the nearly full warehouse of grain, as if looking at an obsessed lover. After Mewtwo and others escaped from the hospital where the strange baby was conceived, they left the neighborhood the next day and came to an area near the center of Lan'an. There are obviously more zombies on both sides of the streets here, and occasionally there are a few middle and high-level heretics mixed in. Even their B-level team had to avoid its sharp edges and act cautiously. After all, if thousands of zombies were to attack a street, even an A-level awakened person would die of hatred. After some arduous lurking, several people finally arrived at this large pre-apocalyptic grain store after getting rid of some low-level zombies. After opening the granary, they discovered a surprising scene in front of them, and then the fat man exclaimed. This grain store seemed to have just opened shortly before the outbreak of the apocalypse. The food in the warehouse had not had time to be sold out before the apocalypse came, so it was piled up to form a spectacular scene. It's too early to be happy now. This rice has been stored in the warehouse for 2 years. It is very likely that it is aged rice that is not suitable for human consumption. Chen Liu was a migrant worker before the end of the world, so he had unique insights into these grains. I saw Chen Liu walking into the warehouse, opening a few bags of rice, putting it on the tip of his nose and smelling it. After going around, his face showed joy. It's okay, the quality is good. This time the fat man's face became excited, and he jumped directly into a pile of grain bags, rolling around wantonly regardless of the dust on them. TCH, I have no knowledge. Song Konghua, who was standing at the door of the warehouse, was very disdainful of the fat man's behavior. Wailinger took Shu Wen's hand and walked into the warehouse with a look of surprise on her face. She jumped up with Shu Wen in her arms. With this much food, I can at least exchange it for several pieces of blue crystal cores when I return to the base. Mewtwo couldn't help but laugh when she saw the eldest lady's happy expression. I have to say that Wailinger's smile is very contagious. This is one of the reasons why Mewtwo decided to go out with Wailinger's team to play. Only by following these flesh and blood humans can Mewtwo feel like a human, instead of a bloodthirsty monster who makes a living by devouring zombie heretics. Concubine Lu Qing looked at the grain in the warehouse and said with a smile, "Let's put these grains away first." Wailinger nodded and took out a fist-sized iron ball from her bag. There are several technological cracks on the ball, and the metal texture is also extremely smooth. Mewtwo was still wondering what the ball was when she saw Wailinger pointing the ball at the grain bag in front of her and tapping the button on it. A light blue metal beam was emitted from the sphere, shining like a scanner on the grain mountain where the grain was accumulated. But then, a strange scene happened. The grain bags illuminated by the metal light disappeared instantly. Mewtwo squinted his eyes. Others might not be able to see it, but he clearly found that the grain was decomposed into certain particles the moment it was illuminated by the light, and was then absorbed by the beam into the fist-sized ball in Wailinger's hand. Is this some kind of storage magic weapon? Mewtwo suddenly asked with a smile. Wailinger burst out laughing when she heard this. do you think this is a novel about cultivating immortals? Wei Ling'er looked at Mu Chu, held up the ball and explained, this is a high-tech storage equipment called a space storage unit. This is a cross-generational strategy obtained from the transaction between our Yuhai base and another safe zone base, ARMS. There is about 30 square meters of storage space inside, which can be used to store resources and supplies obtained from outings, but living organisms cannot be placed. The space storage set is very precious. The base will provide one to every search team that goes out, but they must return it when they return. Mu Chu took the storage device called Space Storage Group from Wei Ling'er's hand. It had a cold metal texture and she didn't know what material it was made of. It stands to reason that this kind of high-tech equipment cannot be manufactured so quickly, or when the end of the world breaks out and there is a lack of talent and equipment, unless this is the work of an awakened person with special powers. Mu Chu looked at the unspectacular round iron ball in front of him and thought to himself. After all, the awakened ones have all kinds of strange abilities, so it is not surprising that they can produce such high-tech equipment. Several people gathered the grain bags in the warehouse and stored them all in the space storage group. They almost filled the 30 square meters of storage space before Wei Ling'er put away this precious storage device. After the team left this large grain store, they continued to carefully explore the neighborhood. During this period, I also encountered several supermarkets and stores, but the strange thing was that all the food and supplies inside had been cleared away, and even the zombies were gone. This place was searched not long ago. Lao Chen stood in a store, looking at the empty shelves, and said, I found traces of looting and some dried blood in some of the surrounding shops. Not long ago, there was a fight. Chen Weo looked at Wei Ling'er with questioning eyes. I suggest exploring this area as soon as possible. It is very likely that there are still survivors here. And among these survivors, there are definitely awakened ones with supernatural powers. Compared with Wei Ling'er, the experienced Chen Weokai is more like the captain of this team, but the experienced Chen will ask Wei Ling'er for his opinion before every action. Wei Ling'er agreed to Lao Chen's suggestion without much thought. Lao Chen's existence was more like a think tank in their team, and he could always put forward the most appropriate suggestions for the current situation. Wei Ling'er held the youngest Xu Wen, and Lao Chen followed them to protect them. Song Kongwa originally wanted to take advantage of this opportunity to be alone with Lu Qingfei, but his body was not healed and he could not survive the danger. In the end, the fat man acted with them. Both sides searched north of the street and south of the block. When Wei Ling'er asked who Mu Chu was acting with, Mu Chu said, I'm more used to acting alone. I'll go to the center of the block to search. This can also save some time. This place is much more dangerous than the previous suburbs. You may encounter danger if you act alone. Lu Qingfei reminded from the side that although she didn't like Mu Chu's behavior, as a member of the team, she still didn't want anything to happen to Mu Chu. Concubine Qing, don't worry about him. Since he claims to be super powerful, he won't be in any danger. Seeing concubine Lu Qing being so concerned about Mu Chu, Song Kongwa was very jealous and began to ridicule Mu Chu. A cold glint flashed in Mu Chu's eyes. She smiled lightly and turned to Song Kongwa. I can let you go this time for Ling'er's sake, but next time, I will make you disappear from this world forever. Mu Chu didn't care about an ant under her feet, but she couldn't tolerate an ant crawling onto her leg. Song Kongwa was stared directly into Mu Chu's cold eyes, and for a moment he felt as if he was being stared at by a ferocious beast, and he was like a kitten crawling under the beast's feet, trembling and unable to move. The sound of swallowing came from Song Konghua's throat. At this moment, he couldn't think of any resistance. Illusion. Impossible, this must be an illusion when he was injured. Song Kongwa bit the tip of his tongue, and a trace of blood flowed out from the corner of his mouth. He looked at Mu Chu who was no longer staring at him, and an unknown anger gradually rose in his heart. When Wei Ling'er heard that she was being called so affectionately by Mu Chu, a blush rose on her pretty face. She clenched her feet and said, You can go however you want, I don't care about you. In the end, Mu Chu declined everyone's persuasion and headed to the center of the block alone. Before leaving, Chen Weo handed Mu Chu a wireless walkie-talkie and told Mu Chu to contact them at any time if there was any danger. Mu Chu's figure gradually disappeared from everyone's sight. He immediately activated the invisibility ability of the chicken rabbit flight and snake talisman, and flew dozens of meters away in the blink of an eye. Of course Mewtwo's plan to act alone was not to save the team's time, he just wanted to take the opportunity to test his newly acquired spiritual powers. After all, he has mastered the method of soul attack, and he will have a certain degree of confidence that his soul will leave the body in the future. Mewtwo flew over the several kilometers journey in just a few minutes. Mewtwo moved to the eaves of a house. Looking at the dense group of zombies below, Mewtwo did something that ordinary people would not dare to imagine. He actually jumped straight down. The overwhelming zombies were stunned when they saw Mewtwo, a big, living person, suddenly appearing out of thin air. Immediately, they were hungry and without any hesitation, they directly waved their fangs and claws and rushed towards Mewtwo like wild beasts. The black windbreaker behind Mewtwo moved with the wind, and the breeze blew the broken hair on Mewtwo's forehead, but Mewtwo did not move. He stood there blankly as if he was frightened. But the next moment, the bloodthirsty zombies that rushed towards him seemed to be whipped by invisible whips, and they flew backwards in a bloody mess. Only Mewtwo could see that thick telepathic tentacles emerged from all around his body, slapping towards the surrounding zombies like the Milky Way pouring out. The invisible tentacles that appeared around Mewtwo seemed to be endless, and the overwhelming zombies around him were all slapped away. Thick, bright red blood flew into the sky along with the broken limbs. The 3 feet around Mewtwo seemed to form an invisible barrier. Nothing could get close to this place, and outside the barrier, there were overwhelming walking corpses. This method is simply more terrifying than that big-headed monster baby. Now I'm a tentacle monster too. Mewtwo smiled, not minding at all that there was an endless tide of corpses of strange beasts right in front of him. He has absorbed the mental power of the big-headed monster baby. Although he cannot control these invisible tentacles like an arm, he can control them to carry out large-scale attacks. Although hundreds of surrounding zombies had been wiped out by Mewtwo's spiritual tentacles in an instant, the tide of zombies behind was still so dark that the horizon could not be seen. Now that the goal has been achieved, it's time to do something serious. Mewtwo murmured, her body already floating in the air. With his hands in his pockets, there seemed to be an invisible step under his feet, and he walked slowly towards the distance. But just a few meters away from Mewtwo, below, were terrifying zombies with livid faces, bulging eyes, stains of old blood on their bodies, and bloodthirsty pupils. They stretched out their arms wildly, trying to catch Mewtwo and feast on her, but they were helpless and could only roar while rubbing shoulders. After leaving the group of corpses, Mewtwo briefly searched the surrounding shops. There are also traces of being searched here, most of which are food supermarkets and some clothing stores. Interestingly, Mewtwo also discovered that some items were missing in an unmanned adult product store. Interesting. Mewtwo touched her chin and already had an idea in her mind. A quarter of an hour later, Mewtwo walked to a large toy supermarket. Roar! As soon as he entered the door, a huge mutated zombie rushed towards Mewtwo with its bloody mouth open. Mewtwo walked forward slowly, as if she hadn't seen the sea-level mutant zombie, with her signature smile still on her face. But the moment the obese zombie approached him, Mewtwo stood there, raised his arm, and grabbed the mutated zombie's face. The next second, the devouring ability is activated. An irresistible force of devouring was launched from Mewtwo's palm, and the mutated zombie began to twitch violently. A heavy roar came from the zombie's throat, and its originally huge body of several meters was withering and dehydrating at a speed visible to the naked eye. The iron-colored skin began to become darker and darker, and the roar in the zombie's throat turned into a weak groan. In less than a few seconds, the zombie was sucked into a dregs-like mummy by Mewtwo. Mewtwo shook her arm, feeling that there was almost no experience bar floating in her body, and shook her head with a smile. This is a physical store specializing in action figures. As soon as Fang entered, Mewtwo saw rows of familiar anime characters listed on the booth. Mewtwo played with these expensive toys that he had dreamed of before with great interest for a while, then put down his mind and walked forward. In the middle of the store, a huge life-size figure is displayed in a glass booth. This is the image of a beautiful girl. Loose light pink twin tails are tied behind her head, with a red hairpin pinned behind her head. Her face is as delicate as a porcelain doll. People can't help but marvel at how delicate hands can create such an angelic face and expression. The cuteness add a touch of human fireworks to Chi-Chu-chan's face. The orange-red skirt seemed to set her off in the middle of a bunch of flowers, and at the same time, it also revealed her slim and charming figure. Pure, cute, and delicate, this girl seemed to embody all the good things in the world. I pray. Miu Chu looked at the girl-like figure and murmured softly. The figure girl in front of me is none other than the heroine from the anime, Guilty Crown, Yuki. Miu Chu looked at the girl's delicate face through the glass booth, as if she could feel the girl's inner sadness. This is a poor girl. Poor life experience, poor ending. God didn't seem to give her any mercy because of her angelic appearance. Suddenly, the corners of Miu Chu's mouth rose slightly. He thought of an interesting thing. Miu Chu put her hand on the glass booth, and a scorching flame burst out from her palm, and the glass was melted by the blazing flame in an instant. Miu Chu's slender fingers stretched out into the booth and touched the figure's cold eyebrows. Immediately afterwards, Miu Chu used the ability of the rat talisman in her body. Turn stillness into movement. Soon, Miu Chu felt that one of the 12 powers that originally belonged to his body had been taken away, and an inexplicable vitality slowly flowed from his fingertips into the figure in front of him. At the same time, a strange connection was concluded in Miu Chu's heart like a contract. And gradually, the touch of the fingertips was no longer the cold branches, but turned into the soft texture of real flesh. The PVC figures in front of me are becoming real at a speed visible to the naked eye. The girl's crimson eyes instantly became lively and lively from their original blankness, and her silky cherry pink hair fluttered. The resurrected girl fell from the exhibition stand. Miu Chu gently put her toes around her waist and looked into the girl's smart red eyes. Where is this? After the girl was resurrected, plain words came out of her lips. With her naturally dull personality, she did not feel anxious because she was in a foreign place. Instead, she looked around and finally looked at Miu Chu. Somehow, she felt an inexplicable feeling of dependence on this strange man in front of her whom she had never met before. Miu Chu felt the soft touch in his arms. Similarly, he could also sense that there was some kind of attachment bond between himself and the girl. Is it because of the power of the rat charm? I pray. With a smile on her lips, Miu Chu explained, I know you may not be able to accept it for a while, but now you are no longer in the world before. Immediately afterwards, Miu Chu briefly informed that the world was in the end of the world, and that Chi-Chi was just an anime character he summoned. Let me put it this way, you can probably understand, right? Miu Chu looked at the girl's innocent eyes and smiled bitterly. Normal people will at least feel anxious and unbelievable when encountering this kind of thing, even if they don't collapse immediately. But Lu Qi looked directly at Miu Chu with her pure eyes without any impurity, and her plain words did not contain a trace of ripples. I trust you. Why? This time it was Miu Chu who was confused. The lost Christmas. Miu Chu frowned, but when he was puzzled, he saw the girl raise her hand and said, Here, I can't feel its presence. Miu Chu suddenly realized that in the original world of Chi-Chi, there was an apocalyptic virus called Lost Christmas, but this virus did not exist in this world. Miu Chu took off his windbreaker and put it on Chi-Chi's slightly exposed body. Subconsciously, he didn't want others to see the girl's attractive skin. Almost subconsciously, the girl's body trembled slightly and she ducked backwards, but this time a cylindrical potion from her waist fell out. The girl's breathing became unusually rapid. She wanted to pick up the injection-shaped bottle that fell on the ground, but how could her speed be as fast as Miu Chu's? Miu Chu's eyes also lit up when she saw the potion dropped to the ground. With a slight wave of her hand, the potion floated directly in the air under the power of the chicken charm and flew to the palm of Miu Chu's hand. Holding the potion with inexplicable particles swirling around in her hand, Miu Chu felt a slight joy in her heart. I never thought that an act of thought would lead to such unexpected gains. The void genome. Miu Chu's eyes became eager. The reagent he held in his hand was the source of the powerful, king's power, that gave the hero the ability to spy on other people's inner fears in the original work, the void genome. It is rumored that it can analyze the intron coding in the human genome, convert the power contained therein into a physical, void, weapon, and extract it from the body. Click. Without any hesitation, Miu Chu kept crushing the test tube, and the swallowing ability was activated in the next second. Miu Chu could clearly feel a mysterious force entering her body. Have you touched the powerful power of the god's realm? I also want to experience it. Miu Chu whispered with a faint smile, and an unknown force called void began to flow into his body. Breathe. This is to be handed over to Ya. The girl fell to the ground and stared blankly at Chu, who was wrapped in countless void laws, self-blame and guilt. It seems that at this stage, Yuki has not met the protagonist Sakura Manji yet. Looking at the girl with disappointment in her eyes, Chu stepped forward to help her up, gently pressed her soft cheek and said, "You don't have to feel sad, because this world is no longer the world you live in. In other words, there is a virus in this world that is far more terrifying than the lost Christmas." Immediately afterwards, Chu gave a brief overview of this cruel apocalypse to Chi-Chi. Chi-Chi listened to Chu's explanation in a daze, as if he had not yet recovered from the incident of Chu devouring the void genome. Chu, who had gained new power, couldn't wait to use her ability to draw out the inner fear of others. But he suddenly thought that the conditions for extracting the void required that the target must be a human under the age of 17 infected with the apocalypse virus. Humans under the age of 17 are easy to find, but where in this world is there any apocalypse virus called Lost Christmas? Chu couldn't laugh anymore when she thought about this problem. Then wouldn't this king's power, obtained through injection, be completely useless? No. There's another chance. Chu turned her head to look at Chi-Chi beside her, her eyes filled with unprecedented sincerity and excitement. If there is one last human being in this world who can be drawn out of the void weapon, it is this delicate and lovely angel-like girl in front of her. Although it sounds sudden to say this, Miss Yuki, please lend me your power. Chu suddenly said this, then she put her arms around Chi-Chi's delicate shoulders and looked directly into the girl's crimson pupils. The next second, Chu spread out her right hand and attacked the softness on the girl's chest. Chu, what are you doing? Suddenly, a charming and angry voice came. Chu's chest struck, movement paused, and she turned her head and stared blankly at Weilinger and his group coming from the door. Wipe, miscalculated. Just now, Chu was so focused on experiencing the new strength that she didn't notice the presence of a living person at the door. So Weilinger and others saw this situation after entering the door. Chu stood straight forward, and beside him was a delicate and lovely girl. The girl was wearing a black trench coat, but the bare fair skin on her arms could be clearly seen. It seems like there are very few clothes underneath. What surprised a few people even more was that Chu was holding the girl's slender waist, while his right hand was reaching for some indescribable place on the girl's chest. Chu, I really didn't expect you to be this kind of person. Weilinger's reaction was particularly fierce. She first covered the eyes of the youngest Shu Wen, and then when Chu put down her hand and turned her head, she directly picked up a school bag at her feet and threw it towards Chu. For the first time, Chu was dodging awkwardly, and for a moment she didn't know how to explain her action. But Chi-Chi was a little confused. She didn't know where she was or the identities of the people in front of her. In desperation, she hid behind Chu, who was subconsciously getting close to her. Autumn. Only then did Weilinger see the girl's face clearly. This outfit made her stunned for a moment. Zichi. It seems that Weilinger was also an old housewife before the apocalypse broke out. Chu panicked and explained. She was a coser at a comic show before the end of the world. I just found her while searching for ruins. Her companions died one after another after the apocalypse happened, and now she is the only one left. I saw how pitiful she was, so I took her with me. Oh, Weilinger looked around at Chu and the cute Chi-Chi with questioning eyes, and then asked, then what were you doing just now? Chu had cold sweat on her forehead, and she didn't know how to explain it for a moment. Fortunately, Weilinger's attention was quickly attracted. Weilinger was seen staring blankly at Chi-Chi's appearance, and said in surprise, wow, are all coser restorations so high nowadays? She pinched Chi-Chi's tender face and asked curiously, what's your name? I pray. The girl wearing a red goldfish suit opened and closed her lips and said surprising words in a plain voice. Weilinger looked at Chi-Chi with doubtful eyes, then looked at Chu, nodded her head, and whispered, is there something wrong with her here? Chu. Immediately afterwards, Chen Liu also stepped forward to smooth things over. After the end of the world, I have seen many people choose to give up their past and choose to live the lives of other characters after experiencing terrible pain. I think this little girl should be in the same situation. Seeing this as a good opportunity, Chu nodded and whispered back, she was like this when I met her. This girl is also pitiful. Wei Ling and Chen Huio both showed pity and lamented that the hard times in the world could drive a girl crazy like this. Chi-Chi, who still didn't understand the situation, tilted her head and looked at a few people blankly. She didn't know what these people were talking about. Suddenly, she felt the hem of her skirt being pulled. Chi-Chi looked down and saw the youngest Shu Wen gently tugging on her skirt, holding a candy in her little hand. A smile appeared on Chi-Chi's face as delicate as a porcelain doll. After taking the candy, she tore off the icing and put the candy into her mouth. By the way, why did you come to the center of the block? Chu looked at Wei Ling and the others and asked. It stands to reason that they should be searching the northern peripheral area at this time, but why did they turn back? Chen Huio explained with a smile. We did a rough search and found no useful clues. Ling brought us back because she was worried about Brother Mu's safety. Wei Ling's face suddenly turned red and she said anxiously, who cares about this scumbag? Chu scratched the side of her face in embarrassment, but she didn't know how to explain the scene just now, so she changed the subject and said, speaking of which, why haven't you heard from Fatty and the others? Chen Huio shook his head. Since we just separated, there has been no news about them. Just at this time, a call came from the walkie-talkie on Chen Huio's waist. Chen Huio quickly took out the walkie-talkie to answer the call. The familiar voice of Fat Zhu Feng came on the phone. Old Chen, are you there? Hearing the sound of the fat man needing a beating, Chen Huio breathed a sigh of relief, raised his walkie-talkie and asked, it's me, fat man, how are you doing now? The fat man's voice came from the other side of the intercom. Don't tell me, you really told us to discover the situation. We found a group of survivors in a high-end hotel on South Street, led by several awakened people. But, I see that their life is pretty good. It's much better than what we live in the base. It makes me want to join them. Chu and the others were still confused when they heard the fat man's voice on the intercom gradually lowered, as if he was talking to someone. Go to the hot springs, wait for me, wait for me. Strangely, a woman's voice could be faintly heard from the intercom. Hey, Lao Chen, I'll send you the location now. Come here now, it's really interesting here. It's much more comfortable than at the base. Then, there was the beep of the intercom, and the fat man had already hung up the phone. Chen Huio also didn't know why this time. He scratched his head and several people looked at each other in confusion. It was Chu who spoke first. In that case, let's go over to Fatty and his friends first to see what's going on. Chen Huio and Wei Ling nodded at the same time, turned to look at Chi-Chi beside them. At this time, I saw that Lu Chi was actually playing with Shu Wen's pet squirrel. He gently poked the squirrel's furry cheek with his green-white jade finger, and there was a hint of curiosity in his cute eyes. The little Lolita Shu Wen was watching this scene from the side, covering her mouth and snickering. A brown shadow crossed the blue sky. I saw a petite brown sparrow swooping down from a tall building. As the breeze blew, I could only see its swift afterimage faintly in the steel jungle of the ruins of the city. Not long after, the brown-haired sparrow circled the surrounding buildings and slowly landed in the palm of a delicate little hand. Shu Wen communicated with the little sparrow for a moment, then turned to Chu and the others who were standing under a towering tree and replied. Mao Mao said there are no zombies around anymore, but for some reason it seems a little scared and doesn't dare to enter the hotel. Chen Huio held the locator in his hand, with red dots flashing on it, and looked at a high-end and luxurious-looking hotel not far away from them, and said, you can't be wrong, the hotel the fat man mentioned is here. Quote. Chu and Wei Ling set out from the toy supermarket in the center of the block and traveled several kilometers before arriving at the hotel in front of them. This, New Century Resort Hotel, is located in the suburbs of Linan City, with a height of more than 10 floors. The exterior paint of the hotel door has not faded even after 2 years. 2 stone lions squat on it. The entrance adds a majestic and luxurious atmosphere to the hotel. Have all the zombies around been cleared out? Chu rubbed his chin. Along the way, he could feel that the zombies around the hotel had been artificially cleared away. Wei Ling turned back to Chu and the others and said, Chu, please protect Wenwenen. Chi-Chi, Lao Chen and I are exploring the way ahead. Obviously, Wei Ling still wasn't used to the title of Chi. Just like that, the group of 5 people slowly walked towards the hotel door. Mu Chu followed Wei Ling, as if she suddenly felt something, her steps stopped. Chi, who was following Mu Chu, bumped directly into Mu Chu's back. Bang! Suddenly, the closed door of the hotel was suddenly opened from the inside, and 2 men wearing security uniforms walked out. The 2 men wore iron batons used by security guards at their waists, but had kind smiles on their faces. These are 2 awakened ones. Mu Chu instantly sensed the strength of the 2 security guards, and the supernatural energy of these 2 security guards was not low, probably at the early stage of B level. The 2 security guards walked out of the door, smiled at Wei Ling and others who looked wary, and said, "I think these are the companions Mr. Zhu and the others mentioned." Fat man. The 2 security guards in front of them did not seem to be hostile, but Wei Ling and others still did not let down their guard. "Mr. Zhu and the others have been waiting for you inside for a long time. Please come in with us." After saying that, 2 men who looked like security guards took the lead and walked in front. Wei Ling turned to look at Mu Chu and Chen Huio, and they followed the security guard into the hotel. The interior decoration of the hotel is also extremely luxurious, magnificent, and the layout is grand and noble. Before the end of the world, it would have been a high-end place that only the top social elite could access. What's even more surprising is that the hotel still maintains efficient power supply. You know, it has been 2 years since the outbreak of the apocalypse, and the entire city of Linan has long been paralyzed. It is surprising that this hotel has maintained power supply for 2 years. Even the power supply has not been restored to most of the equipment in the Yuhai base. This gathering place of survivors among the zombies looks more luxurious than most people in the base. Seemingly seeing the shock in the eyes of Wei Ling and others, one of the security guards smiled and explained. "There is a generator inside the hotel. Thanks to this generator, it can maintain power supply below the 3rd floor of the hotel, which provides a lot of convenience for us survivors." Judging from his appearance, there is no trace of the misery of struggling to survive in the apocalypse, which is in sharp contrast to the survivors in the slums of the Yuhai base. What made these 2 security guards not worry at all? Mu Chu keenly noticed that the 2 security guards were strong and full of heaven, and they did not look like they were starving or suffering at all. From time to time, neatly dressed ordinary people passed by on both sides. Some of these survivors were holding dirty clothes, some were carrying food, and they all had satisfied smiles on their faces. When passing by 2 security guards, these survivors did not forget to say hello, and both security guards responded politely with a smile. In this apocalypse where people cannibalize people, are awakened people with absolute power really willing to continue to be a security guard for ordinary people? Moreover, the apocalypse has been going on for 2 years, and human nature is the least able to withstand the test. Even the most kind-hearted people will have evil thoughts in the face of profit and resources. And between these awakened people and ordinary people, there is not even the slightest class barrier. Mu Chu became more and more curious about the ruler of this hotel. What allowed the awakened people and ordinary people in the hotel to share resources and live in harmony? While Mu Chu was thinking, 2 security guards had already led several people to a bar on the 1st floor of the hotel. The waiter at the bar promptly handed over a few glasses of red wine, seemingly not caring about the identities of Mu Chu and others. There was a row of figures sitting on the seats not far in front of the bar. 3 of them were the fat man who originally searched the southern district, Lu Qingfei and Song Konghua. The fat man was lying on the bar with a red face, flirting with one of the waitresses. When he saw Wei Ling, Mu Chu and the others, he immediately jumped down from his seat, burped and said, "Boss, you are here. The owner of this hotel is so considerate in his service, hire." The fat man smelled of alcohol and seemed to have drunk a lot. From his tone, he seemed to have great respect for the hotel owner. Lu Qingfei also drank some wine. Her face was a little red, but she still had some sense. She looked at Mu Chu and others approaching, with a smile on her reddish face. "You are here. Sister Qingfei, what's going on?" Wei Ling looked at Song Konghua, who was chatting with another boy of similar age, with a confused look on her face. Lu Qingfei replied, "We accidentally discovered this hotel while searching in the southern district. It turns out that the survivors of this neighborhood after the apocalypse gathered here, and they were all taken in by the owner of this hotel. There are also several other awakened people in the hotel who have also joined the team to accommodate the survivors. They live in harmony with the survivors and help each other to create such a paradise in the apocalypse. Lu Qingfei's flushed face showed a look of relief, and she drank all the red wine in her glass. It seems that there are still kind people in this world. Concubine Lu Qing, who is used to seeing too much darkness and sordidness in the apocalypse, has a lot of empathy for this kind of thing about saving the world and saving people. The waitress at the counter also felt the same way. Thanks to our manager, we have a place in this apocalyptic world. The waitress seemed to think that Mu Chu and others were survivors who had just been rescued back to the hotel. She kept praising the hotel owner for his kindness and wisdom, trying to improve the hotel owner's status in the hearts of Mu Chu and others. But Mu Chu always felt that something was strange, but she couldn't explain it clearly. Everyone here is radiant and full of energy, and their eyes seem to be filled with hope and yearning for the future. What are they yearning for? At this time, the fat man, who had drunk too much, realized that Chi-Chi was following behind Mu Chu. His eyes widened. Zhu Chi. Well, this fat guy is also an old homebody. The fat man seemed to have sobered up a bit from the alcohol, and his eyes were filled with disbelief as he approached. Concubine Lu Qing also noticed that the delicate-looking Chi-Chi, who was wearing a black trench coat, seemed to have come with Mu Chu and the others, and couldn't help but ask, "Who is this girl?" When Weilinger saw Fatty's excited reaction, she quickly told several people that Chi-Chi was a coser and that she had been substituted into the persona of Chi-Chi after the apocalypse and could not extricate herself. Song Kongwa was originally chatting with another man on the side, but when he heard the noise here, he also came over. When he saw Yu Chi for the first time, Song Kongwa also had a flash of surprise in his eyes. After hearing the story of Chi-Chi, concubine Lu Qing couldn't help but look at Chi-Chi with pity in her eyes, and sighed. This child must have experienced a lot of grievances. However, the fat man was very drunk and rubbed his eyes in disbelief. This restoration is too similar, it is more like a real person than a real person. Chi-Chi looked around at the crowd and found that everyone was staring at him, feeling a little uncomfortable, with a pair of red eyes full of innocence. Feeling Chi-Chi gently tugging at the corner of her clothes, Mu Chu coughed lightly and turned her attention to the man who just walked with Song Kongwa. Who is this? Before Song Kongwa could speak, the fat man introduced him. He is Lao Song's childhood friend. Weilinger turned her gaze to Song Kongwa, and only then did Song Kongwa show a rare expression of joy. He put his arm around the shoulder of the man next to him and said, "Adong is my brother since childhood. I haven't seen him since the apocalypse broke out. I didn't expect to meet him here." Adong seemed to be a shy boy. Being looked at by so many beauties, he lowered his head in embarrassment and just said softly, "Hello, you guys." Only then did a few people discover that Adong's left sleeve was empty and one of his arms was broken. Sensing the attention of everyone, Adong explained, "It was broken while escaping 2 years ago, but my dominant hand is my right hand. I can still live without an arm, which is much better than those who lost their lives." While everyone was talking, one of the security guards came over and reminded, "I have kept you waiting for a long time. I will take a few of them to see the manager now." Everyone followed the security guards and walked over, but before leaving, Adong grabbed Song Kongwa. Song Kongwa turned his head and saw Adong's complicated and tangled expression. After 2 seconds, Adong seemed to have made some big decision. He sighed and said to Song Kongwa, "Kongwa, I live a good life here. You should leave here as soon as possible." Quote. Mu Chu was walking behind. When she heard Adong's words, her eyes flashed. She didn't know what she thought of, but the expression on her face was as if she didn't realize it, and she continued to walk forward. The decoration of the entire hotel is similar to a Western-style castle, spacious and luxurious. Many survivors also passed by along the way, but they still had smiles on their faces and eyes full of hope, as if they had forgotten the sorrow of living in the end of the world. A couple was walking in the empty lobby of the hotel with their children in hand. The family had a harmonious and warm atmosphere, and it looked as if they were just out for an ordinary outing. The couple whispered lovingly, and there was a lot of love in their eyes. "This is truly a paradise. Yes, it will be difficult to see such a scene after the end of the world. The fat man suddenly said, under the influence of his drunkenness, let me tell you, we might as well stay in this hotel, and we will have to live a precarious and miserable life when we get back to the base. But as soon as he said this, Wei Linger's sharp eyes struck her back. Soon, the security guard led everyone to a room deep on the second floor. The three characters, manager's room, were clearly engraved on the gilt nameplate at the door of the room. The security guard pushed the door open and saw a desk placed in the room. Sitting in the center of the desk was a short, middle-aged man wearing a black suit, bald head and bald head. Next to the middle-aged man, there was an old man with huge earlobes sitting. The strangest thing is that this old man has a unique appearance, with a pair of earlobes that have almost dropped to his shoulders. He wears a white turban on his head and a kind smile on his face. The room was filled with a faint scent of sandalwood, and an incense burner stood quietly not far away. The security guard introduced. The man in the middle is the general manager of our New Century Resort Hotel, Mr. Sun Yusen. Next to me is Mr. Hong, our hotel consultant. Sun Yu, a short middle-aged man, also had a look of surprise in his eyes when he saw the three women in the team. Obviously, he didn't expect that there would be so many beauties in a team of awakeners. Sun Yu waved his hand to signal the security guard to step back. After the security guard closed the door, Sun Yu said with a smile on his face. Welcome, friends, to our New Century Resort Hotel. I am Sun Yu, the general manager of the hotel. Please forgive me for not having time to go out to greet our distinguished guests. Wei Linger stepped forward and said, Manager Sun, you're welcome. We are the search team from Yuhai Base. We came here this time because we found some shops with signs of being raided while exploring the ruins of the city, so we expected there to be survivors around. The existence of a camp for those. I originally wanted to ask if I needed help, but I didn't expect. Wei Linger paused, feeling a little embarrassed. I didn't expect that a small hotel would be so strong in the apocalypse, and the people inside would be so united, right? Sun Yu, the hotel owner, said with a smile. Wei Linger stuck out her tongue and did not refute. Sun Yu looked unconcerned and then sighed. This is all thanks to my superpower. Superpower, look, everyone. Sun Yu raised his hand, and a gentle beam of light shone towards everyone in his palm. Chen Liu was startled and erected a barrier to block it, but was stopped by Song Konghua. Wait a minute, I don't feel any hostility from him. In an instant, the beam of light shone on several people, and they felt their minds relax for a while. Even the tense nerves in the past few days were relieved. The fat man's body was shocked, and he had woken up from most of the wine. Sun Yu retracted his palm and said, This is my superpower, mental relaxation. I hope everyone will support it and subscribe more.